Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is 8 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday night, and this is going to be the beginning of our weekly, nightly recruiting conversation. And tonight I figure we'll kick it off, and we did something a couple weeks ago, but this is going to kind of where we're going to really get rolling with our regular Wednesday nights. And I figured tonight would be a really good time to go over the board, to go over the Notre Dame board, and we're going to begin talking about players that I view as sort of, it's my hot board. It's the guys that I view Notre Dame as being either they're going to get a commitment or they're in clear pole position where I feel like they're the team to beat. Doesn't necessarily mean they're silently committed. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to commit tomorrow. But if I was a betting man, or if I was a coach and I was looking at our board, if I was a Notre Dame coach, I'd say these are the guys I feel really good about. The second list are sort of guys that I have a growing confidence that Notre Dame is if not in the lead where there's a clear leader, they're at least in the conversation to be the leader, and a kid that over the next couple months Notre Dame could close on if they push. And then the third category is sort of they're top guys that I believe Notre Dame has work to do to land, or guys that I believe it's too early to get too excited about, including some guys that I think Notre Dame might lead for, and I'll explain it. And how we're going to go about it is I'm going to do some talking. I'm going to go over my board. I'm going to explain what I see, what I think. I'm going to hold off on the questions until the end. If you, however, really want to get something in that's relevant to what we're talking about at that time, just do a super chat, or if you just feel like you want to get a question in about something, do a super chat, and I'll get that in there for you at some point in time too. But I'm going to kind of focus on going through my list first, and then at the end of that, I'll go through all your questions and comments, and we'll keep talking until we run out of questions. Sound good? Everybody ready to go? So let's dive into it. So obviously right now, Notre Dame has the number 4 recruiting class in the country, according to Rivals, according to 247 Sports, and on the 247 Sports composite list. When you look at it as a group, it's 12 commits. There's 6 guys on both sides of the ball. I think right now, if I were to look at the class, I think we're looking at a 22 to 23 man class right now, with a chance to grow as more scholarships come available. Whether that's from guys hitting the transfer portal, whether that's guys that are going to see their careers basically come to an end because of injury. So I do think we're going to see some scholarships open up. There may be some guys that the staff looks at and says, hey, we thought this guy was going to be a 5th-year senior, but now we don't view him as that way. So that is really how it goes, how it's going to go. So that is what has to happen for Notre Dame to get to that 25, 26, because as you look at all the numbers and the position, take 3 here, take 2 there, take 4 there, take whatever. So, okay, now you're talking about like 25, 26, 27 guys. That can be a little bit more challenging. But Notre Dame, what I like about what the staff is doing is they're recruiting in a way to where they're acting as if they're going to land a big class. And what you can do is, if you get to the point where you're just not in a position where you can take that many, then you can say, hey, look, we can't take another guy at your position. We have to move on. But if you recruit for a smaller class and then spots come open down the road and you try to expand your board, the odds of that being successful are a lot less. So I really like the strategy that this staff is going over. So let's begin by going over the hot board. Let me share it here with you. All right, so for me, this is the Notre Dame hot board. This is the guys that I look at and I say, and it's going to require a little bit of nuance, but these are the guys that I look at and say, if I had to make a prediction today, I'd feel real good about where Notre Dame stands with these 8 guys. Now, having said that, there's no way Notre Dame's going to land all 8 of these guys, and I'll get to that, and that's going to be revolve around the defense as we get close to that. So let's begin by talking about on the offensive side. I think Holden Stace is a player that Notre Dame, I believe, is in great shape with. I think the fact that the staff wants 2 tight ends, the fact that they have not expanded their tight end board at any point in time tells you that the staff is confident where they land. There was talk that he could have committed. He could have gone public with a commitment last month. I think here's the reason why I think Holden Stace is holding it's kind of ironic, is holding out on making a public commitment to Notre Dame or making a final decision for Notre Dame. And that is that he's already been committed somewhere else. He was committed to Penn State and then decided to decommit. From what I'm told from people that have talked to him, people close to the situation, he doesn't want to go through that again. He doesn't want to do another decommitment thing. He didn't like that that's how the process went, but he just felt that was what was best for him. So I'm sympathetic to his desire to want to make sure that this is the right decision before he moves on and makes that decision. So really appreciate that. So it goes 76. Really, really, really appreciate that. We'll keep it rolling. But that is where I think they are with him. I think they're in great shape. He's going to visit. He originally had his visit for the end of the month. He has since moved that visit up to earlier in the month. And I think, like I said, I think Notre Dame's in really good shape. If I was putting odds on it, I'd feel good about the odds that I would put on that Holden Stace eventually is going to become a public member of this class. So I really like where they're at with him. When you look at the offensive line, if I were to say which offensive lineman that I would feel best about saying that Notre Dame is going to get that guy, Billy Schrouth would be a guy that I would look at. Billy Schrouth's an interesting player. I liked Billy coming as a sophomore. I thought that he was a tough kid, good athlete, really liked how he played. His junior film was even better. He was much more explosive off the ball, just not so much from like a power standpoint because he always had the power. What I liked about what I saw from Billy Schrouth as a junior was he came off the ball with so much more speed, and that speed combined with the power he already possessed allowed him to be a really, really talented player. Now, I still think he's more of a guard right tackle. He played guard in high school. He played guard this past year as a junior. He's a very good defensive lineman. I had a buddy of mine ask me the other day, do you think he could play defensive tackle in college? I don't think he could play defensive tackle at a place like Notre Dame, but I think he's a guy that could go to some places and play defensive line. He's got that kind of quickness off the ball. He's got really strong hands, really long arms. I really like Billy Schrouth. I like him more now after breaking down his junior film than I did before. And before I thought he was a top 150 to 200 type of player. Now I think he's more of like a 75 to 125 type of player. So I really like where Notre Dame is with him. If you get him in a class with Joey Tanona and Ty Chan, you're talking about 3 top 200 to 250 caliber players. Billy Schrouth would be in competition with Joey Tanona to be that top guy. And right now I put Billy a little bit ahead of Joey. So that should tell you something because I think you all know how much I like Joey Tanona. Carson Hinsman I'd put a little bit below Billy Schrouth from a confidence level standpoint. I think Carson is an outstanding player. I think that he is a guy that, to me, is a center guard prospect. I think he's probably a more natural center even than he is a guard just because of his quickness. Not so much from a snapping standpoint because I haven't seen him snap, but I'm talking about just the quickness, the leverage. He plays with a really nice natural leverage. He's got a really nice punch as a guard. I really like him quite a bit. As far as a player, I think he's he's in that 75 to 125 range. And so that's where I look at him and say, this is a guy that I really, really like. And if I had to put odds on it, I'd say that, Notre Dame to me is his leader, in my opinion. This isn't something that Carson has said. This is from, talking to people close to the situation, talking to him when I interviewed him a couple weeks. There's just a little something different about Notre Dame, but Iowa and Wisconsin are also both pushing. So this is far from a done deal. But right now, ahead of visits, I really like where Notre Dame stands, and I like the fact that Notre Dame's visit is after Iowa and Wisconsin. Here's a quick question from Thomas Walsh. Thank you for the super chat. Do you know if staff is still pursuing another quarterback committed elsewhere or not? Great news doing Wednesday nights. Yes, we're going to keep it up. I do not believe they're recruiting any more quarterbacks. There was another question, I believe, from Jason that he asked about a second quarterback. And the reason I say no is because I think the staff settled in on Steve Angeli. They told Steve Angeli, you are our quarterback in this class. I think if they were to recruit a second quarterback, it would probably be a situation like it was with Jack Nickel. But I don't think that's what they're doing. From my conversations with people, it sounds like that Notre Dame is focusing their attention right now on 2023 quarterbacks. Tonight, they offered Malachi Nelson, who is a 5-star quarterback from California. Very talented quarterback out there. He's another one of those guys. They're on Dante Moore. There's a good list of quarterbacks that they're currently pursuing in 2023. I don't think they'd be recruiting quarterback that hard if they were going to take 2 quarterbacks in this class. I think it'd be a situation where, you'd kind of pass on next year. If you have Buckner, you have Pine, Buckner, and then 2 quarterbacks in this class, it's going to be hard to then convince another quarterback next year to join the fold. I think the only way that I'd look at a second quarterback in this class is if it was like an Avery Davis type of player who you viewed as someone who you'd eventually move. But I don't see that player on the board. So I don't see that. You won't see quarterback on any of the lists that we talk about tonight. So let's go over to the defense. So here's the thing. Notre Dame is going to take 4 linebackers in this class. From everything that I've heard, everyone that I've talked to, all the sources that I have, they're going to take 4 linebackers in this class. That includes rovers. If you look at the group of players that they're on right now, these 3 guys right here, you've already got Nolan Ziegler in the class. You've got Josh Burnham in the class. And then you have Sebastian Cheeks, Jalen Sneed, Junior Tuihalamaka. That right there is the order in which I am most confident about those players picking Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has really turned a corner with Sebastian Cheeks in recent weeks. I think for a while there, he liked Notre Dame, but he was really trying to see what else was out there. I think Marcus Freeman and the staff have worked really hard to try to get him to just be more just locked into what Notre Dame is doing. So I really feel good about where Notre Dame stands with him. I think that Jalen Sneed Notre Dame is very much surging with him. I think Oregon is another top contender for him, which is kind of an interesting list. He came out with his top 5 recently. I believe it also had Tennessee. I believe Texas A&M was on it as well. But he is a guy to me that I look at and say, this is a player that Notre Dame has done about as good of a job recruiting as you can get. And I think Notre Dame has put themselves in pole position with him. His top 5 was Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Oregon. Jalen Sneed's an intriguing player because I think he's probably the most raw of the 3, but I think you could argue he has the highest ceiling of the 3. He brings some interesting versatility to the table. And then you have Junior Tuihalamaka, who is a pure middle linebacker that I think could also do some other things, but I love him as a middle linebacker. Notre Dame is in a situation, from everything that I've gathered, that it's at a point now where it's, we love you 3. We have 2 spots. Who wants to come? And I don't believe there's a single linebacker that they would say, we're going to hold off on you committing because we're waiting on someone else. My understanding is whoever wants to jump on board is going to have a spot. But once they get to 4, they're shutting it down. And so that's where Notre Dame is at. I do not believe that Devin Jackson is a candidate right now. He is a guy that is behind. I think that right now Notre Dame loves his athleticism. He's obviously an incredibly fast athlete, but he's not as natural of a football player as these other 3. Cornerback, Devin Moore and Benjamin Morrison. Notre Dame really likes Devin Moore. My understanding from this process is that Notre Dame was not originally planning to take 3 corners because they just signed 4 and then 3 the year before that. But when they look at this class, there's a lot of versatility in it, and they like these 2 players just too much. These, from everything I've been able to gather, this right here is Notre Dame's top 2 cornerbacks on the board. I don't view either of them as committing in the very near future. These are guys, however, that I believe going into the June visits, Notre Dame has placed themselves in pole position with both players. I feel very good about those 3 guys. So that is my big board. That is where I see things standing right now. That is my top group. Now there's the second group, and these are guys that I believe have growing confidence that these players either Notre Dame leads for, or Notre Dame is putting itself in that top 1 or 2, 3 group that with a strong performance this spring and this summer, Notre Dame could lead for. My number 1 guy on offense in that regards for the growing confidence on offense is CJ Williams. I think that Notre Dame has put themselves in position to I still think it's too early to say that Notre Dame is his leader, but I think Notre Dame is starting to distance itself. We've talked about CJ for a long time. Notre Dame has been on a bit of a roller coaster with his recruitment, in that I felt like early on they were his top school. There's pictures that they've been putting on other sites, USC sites and other sites where he's wearing a Notre Dame shirt, right? And it's not Notre Dame High School out in California. It's the University of Notre Dame. And then, of course, they kind of faded a little bit. I think Tommy Rees, I think Brian Kelly, even Dell Alexander have really worked hard to get themselves back in position there. Ohio State is still a big factor for him. There's other schools involved with him. But I think right now, Notre Dame is in as good a position as anybody. The summer visits are going to be important. They're going to have to figure out a way to say, hey, look, you're our guy. We love you, and we want to have you part of this class. And they're going to have to stay on them hard and, going up until and then through the visit. I reluctantly put Joe Bruner in this conversation. I think Notre Dame is in a good place with him. I think in the last couple months they've grown up his list. I still don't think they're in the same shape with him that they are with guys like Hinsman and Shrouth. I don't view them as being in that shape. I know some other people have. I believe that there are some people that have crystal balled or predicted him to Notre Dame. I'm just not ready to be there yet. I don't know if his interest in Notre Dame is quite to that level. And I think that there's some other guys that Notre Dame likes as much, if not a little bit more than him. So I'm not sure that they're going to push to have him in the class as quickly as they may push for Shrouth and Hinsman, is kind of how I read the situation. And then in defense, I feel really good about where Notre Dame is right now with Anthony Lucas. If you listen to the recruiting podcast yesterday, you know my stance on Anthony Lucas. That could arguably be the biggest recruit in this class. And I feel Notre Dame's in a very good place with him. Now, they've got to get him on campus. He's going to be on campus June 11th to June 13th, which is going to be a huge weekend for Notre Dame. Right now, based on the list that we've been able to confirm, they're going to have Dallin Hayden, Holden Stace, Jake Taylor, Anthony Lucas, Junior Tuihalamaka, Devin Moore, Nakai Martinez, and Jake Pope on campus that weekend. That is a very, very impressive group of players. And I like where Anthony Lucas is at with where Notre Dame is. Now, Texas, Alabama are still very much in the mix. That's why I don't put him in the hot board category, because there's still work to be done. But I would rather be where Notre Dame is right now than anybody else. But it is close. It's going to be a battle. Donovan Heinisch is an interesting one. I'm still trying to figure out if he's even a take at Notre Dame. I don't know the answer to that question yet. I know that Notre Dame likes him, but I'm a little surprised that if he is a take that he hasn't committed yet. So I'm curious. I'm still trying to figure out that one right now. We had an interview with him yesterday. I know he likes Pittsburgh. I also know that Donovan wants to kind of blaze his own trail, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want to come to Notre Dame. It just means that he wants to make sure that Notre Dame is the right place for him should he pick it. But again, I'm a little uncertain if he's actually a take for Notre Dame right now. And that's kind of where I'm at with the growing confidence. And it's a combination of guys that I think Notre Dame is in a really good shape for that could also be summer decisions. There's another list of players that I say that it's either there's work to still be done or it's too early. And one player that I have on my too early list is Tobias Merriweather. Now, I think as of today, May 5th, I think Notre Dame's in a really good position with him. Really good position. Here's the problem, however. Tobias has talked about wanting to carry his process out. He wants to take all 5 official visits. He's talked about deciding at one of the All-Star games in January, which means he's not a guy that's in recruiting, like decision mode right now. Well, it's hard for me to say right now in May that a guy that's not going to commit for at least 7 to 8 months is someone I'm feeling hot about or growing confidence about, because all you're doing is putting yourself in a situation where, yeah, you're the leader now, but now everybody knows who to tear down. And so I really just can't get too confident about a guy in May, about a guy that's not going to make a decision. At least that's the plan right now, until January or February. And so now what Notre Dame has to try to do is, if they feel they're in good shape with him, is they have to try to figure out a way to get him to make an earlier decision. And that can be challenging to do for a guy that's as good as he is with the kind of offer list that he has. But if they can do that, that would be great. And if I felt that Tobias was going to make a summer decision or even an early fall decision, I'd bump him up there into the confident category, where, yeah, there's work to be done, but I would rather be Notre Dame than any other school. in his recruitment. But because it's going to be so long before he makes a decision, there's work to be done. Xavier Bradshaw is an interesting player because we're just having a hard time really getting a read on him. I know Notre Dame likes him. They're pushing for him, and they're trying to set up a summer visit. For all we know, one has been set up yet, but he doesn't talk a whole lot. But we're efforting that to try to figure out where things stand. So right now he's in the work to do category. I think he's a kid that's also getting some junior film out to teams, and I'm curious to see how the rest of the country reacts when they start seeing more and more of his junior film, because he's really, really good. I put the big three running backs. We've talked about this. It's Gavin Sawchuk, Dallin Hayden, Nicholas Singleton. In any order you want to put them in, that's the big three. And when I look at where they are with them, I think that Notre Dame is at worst in the top three with all of them. I think they're in the top two with Dallin Hayden. My stance on him has not changed. I think Ohio State is probably the leader, but it's not the lead that most people think it is. He's going to be on campus June 11th and 13th, and that's going to be big for Notre Dame to get him on campus. And so I really like where they're at going into the visits. But when you're not number one, I can't have you in the higher categories. And I do think Ohio State holds a slight lead with him. I just don't believe it's as big as other people. I think Notre Dame is in good shape with Nicholas Singleton, but not as good as maybe they were a couple months ago. I think Penn State is in the mix now. Ohio State is still in the mix. Alabama is making a push. From what I talked to Eric Rudder a little bit tonight, sounds like from the conversations he's had that Alabama is making a push. He may visit Alabama if he hasn't already decided to do so. He's another one. And then Gavin Sawchuk, Oklahoma's in a good position there. Ohio State's also recruiting him. Notre Dame continues to push. So you have to get one of those three. If you get one of those three, then this is a phenomenal running back class. If you miss on all three of those, I'm not going to bang the staff, because I like Jadarian Price. I like what they did last year, and there's guys in 2023 that they're already on. But if you want two backs in this class, you get one of those three guys. You've got a home run running back class, in my opinion. Zach Rice is in that work to do category. Zach is going to make a visit to Notre Dame this summer. Looking at my list right here at irishbreakdown.com, he right now is scheduled for the June 25th to 27th weekend. Jadarian Price is going to be on campus that weekend. Gavin Sawchuk is supposed to be on campus that weekend. CJ Williams is supposed to be on campus that weekend. Jaden Mickey's supposed to be on campus that weekend. KJ Winston is supposed to be on campus that weekend. And Devin Jackson told us that he's going to be on campus this weekend. But I have a feeling that by the time they get to June 25th to 27th, that the linebacker class is going to be full. So I don't see that one taking place. But so Zach Rice is going to be on campus. But as we've talked about before, there's a lot of work to do. He is, however, one of those kids that I believe a visit to Notre Dame could be a game changer for him. But there's work to be done. And I also have Emil Wagner in this list of work to be done, because honestly, the minute Ohio State offered him, it became very challenging for anyone else to get him. And I know Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens went to Wayne, but anyone from Ohio will tell you, when Ohio State offers a kid from Wayne, it would be the upsets of all upsets. And, I look at it too. Look, if Harry Heastan was still the offensive line coach at Notre Dame, my story would not change one bit. And that's a guy who beat Urban Meyer and that staff for guys. But recruiting a kid out of the Cleveland Catholic School League or the Cincinnati Catholic Schools is a whole different animal than getting a public school kid from Huber Heights. It's just, having grown up in Ohio, those kids grow up as Ohio State fans, and that's where they're going to go. If Ohio State wants them, that's where they're going to go. So that's my offensive list for the work to be done. My defensive list, obviously Cyrus Moss, we talked about yesterday. He's a kid that Notre Dame is in the top 5. They've got to get him on campus, and they got to knock it out of the park, and I think they've got a shot to do that. I think Cyrus Moss is the kind of kid that when he gets on campus, they have a good pitch for him. He's someone that could be locked in. We're still trying to hammer down exactly when he's going to be on campus. I've heard different times. I don't have him on my official visit list yet, because we're still uncertain of when that visit is going to happen. We haven't been able to confirm with Cyrus where they are with him. Nakai Martinez is one that's on my list at cornerback. I think that Notre Dame is in a good place there, but I don't know how high. I don't, because of where they are with the other two corners, I don't think they're going to take a fourth corner. So to me, I don't know if he should be on the work to do category, but more of a they like him. They would be happy if they got him. But on the pecking order, I'm just not sure if he's as high as Moore and Morrison. And when you already have Jaden Mickey, who also today was named first team All-State by Max Preps after a really good junior year, he's a guy that I don't have in that growing confidence list because I don't know if he's a guy that Notre Dame is they like him and they're pushing, but he's just not quite on that same level as those other players. And then basically the entire safety board is in my work to do category right now. I've got Sherrod Koval is in that group. Xavier Nwakpa, Jake Pope, KJ Winston are probably the four safeties that I look at right now that's Notre Dame's top group right now of players. Koval's talked about making a visit to Notre Dame this summer. We'll see if that happens. Nwakpa is going to be on campus on June 18th to 20th, the same weekend that we have Steve Angeli, Nicholas Singleton, Nick Anderson, Eli Raridan, Carson Hinsman, Billy Schrouth, Joe Bruner, Emil Wagner, Nolan Ziegler. I believe Josh Burnham is going to be in campus that weekend. It will not be an official visit, nor will Nolan Ziegler's scheduled visit that weekend will not be officials. Those officials are likely going to happen in the fall. Probably, I guarantee the USC weekend is going to be a huge recruiting weekend, and they're going to try to get as many commits as possible on campus that weekend for officials. So we'll see how that plays out. Sebastian Cheeks is supposed to be on campus that weekend. Jaden Bellamy is supposed to be on campus that weekend. And, of course, Xavier Nwakpa is supposed to be on campus that weekend. So that's one where Ohio State is the leader. Notre Dame has work to do, just like everybody else has work to do. What I am confident in, we've done some digging on this last couple of days, is he does have legitimate interest in Notre Dame, and the Notre Dame commits are all over Xavier Nwakpa. Now, will that matter in the end? We'll have to find out. But they are – if Notre Dame misses on Xavier Nwakpa, it's not going to be because of lack of effort. It just means he liked another school better. From a coaching staff standpoint, from a commit standpoint, Notre Dame's pulling out all the stops. And that has to give you confidence that if they can get him on campus uncommitted, that they've got a puncher's chance. And that's all you can ask for. And look, I don't care how good of a recruiting staff you are, you're going to miss. What you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, was there anything we could have done different with this kid? And you want to make sure as often as possible that the answer is no. Because sometimes you're going to do everything you can and you're still going to miss. And that's part of it. You can live with that. And Xavier Nwakpa was one of those guys. Jake Pope, I'd put Notre Dame in his top 4 or 5. He came out with a top 12, I believe, recently. I personally would put Notre Dame in his top probably 4 to 5, but until he gets on campus for a visit, which we have scheduled for June 11th to 13th, until he gets on campus for a visit, he's a work-to-do guy. And then KJ Winston's also one that, Notre Dame's in a good place. A lot of people feel like Notre Dame might be his leader. I'm not as confident in that just yet. I think just because I don't know if he's in that I have a leader category. I know he likes Penn State. I know he likes Maryland. There's a lot of schools in the mix for him right now. So that is my breakdown of the board. If guys were not talked about, it's because I don't view them as top-of-the-board guys for Notre Dame right now. Or guys that they're guys that are, it's just too early. There's some other receivers on the board. Taylor Groves is a guy the staff likes. Nicholas Anderson's going to be visiting in this summer. Joseph Griffin was offered recently, but to me, those guys are in that second category of receiver recruits to where you have to get guys from that first group. And that's basically where they're at. So let's dive into some questions here. And if you want to get your question put to the top, give me a super chat and we will bump your question to the very top. So Jason asks, we'll kick things off with Jason here. He says, I know everyone is going to ask about receiver recruiting and who the second running back will be and what the DBs do you think emerge. So he wanted to ask some intriguing questions. Number one, can you envision a scenario that Notre Dame takes 2 quarterbacks in this class? I think we all agree that Angeli is a very solid player. Then for Notre Dame to win a national title, they need a generational QB. Why not take a flyer here? So I talked earlier that I don't think Notre Dame is doing that. And here's part of the reason why, Jason, in my view, is I agree with everything you said practically, but I don't think this is as good of a quarterback class as past classes, last year's class, and next year's class. It's a good quarterback class. There's quarterbacks I like in this class. Y'all know I love Drew Aller. I think that was a mistake. They missed on him. They should have got on him early, but they missed. It is what it is. It happens. They decided to take Steve Angeli. But outside of that, there's good quarterbacks in this class I like. I like Sam Horn. He's a guy that I would have gone after if I was Notre Dame. I liked Gavin Wimsatt, but there's clearly something going on with Gavin Wimsatt that we don't know about because the kid's going to Rutgers, okay? And a lot of schools dropped him, so or at least didn't push for him. So there's something there. There's quarterbacks I've seen, in state. Brady Allen's a nice quarterback. It's a really good pickup for Purdue. What I'm not seeing, Jason, is the elite quarterbacks. I think the kid from Ohio State is a really good quarterback, and he's probably one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the country, but I don't think he's this generational player that people make him out to be. I've seen at least 2 or 3 2023 quarterbacks that I think were better than he was at the same age, at least 2 or 3. And I like Cade Klubnik, if I'm saying that correctly, the kid going to Clemson. I like him a lot. But again, he's an undersized guy that's really a gamer. He's a really good college quarterback. I don't see a Trevor Lawrence in this class. I don't see a Phil Dracovic in this class. I don't see a Justin Fields in this class for what those guys were. So I think that's part of it. If you're going to take a second quarterback, I think it needs to either be a dynamic athlete that you can move somewhere else, or it needs to be a stud. And I just don't think the 2022 quarterback class is loaded with studs. And so that's why I think the staff is rightly focusing its attention on 2023 because, Jason, I don't know how much of the quarterbacks you've watched, and that's going to be our topic next week. Next Wednesday, we're going to talk, before we dive into the Q&A, we're going to talk about 2023 quarterbacks, guys that Notre Dame is on. We're going to watch some film. If you haven't watched 2023 quarterbacks, Jason, and if I know you like I think I do, I'm sure you have already started watching film of those guys. It's a loaded class. Absolutely loaded class. And I think that's what their focus is on right now, understandably so. Jason follows up. Second question. If you were to load up at a position in this class or take a second player, what position would it be? For me, it's Viper, linebacker, or tackle. Jason, when you say tackle, are you talking about offensive tackle or defensive tackle? If you don't mind letting me know on that. But if I could load up at a position in this class, see, here's the things that have to factor into it for me. It's number one is, what's your current depth chart look like? Is there a position where you're a little concerned about the future of your depth chart? You talk about tackle. If you're talking about offensive tackle, which I think you are, I just want to be sure. If you're talking about offensive tackle, for me, you are talking about, okay, I just went and looked at your comment. You are talking about offensive tackle. Yeah, I would go high there. I think for a couple reasons. So when this class shows up on campus, Blake sophomore is going to be a sophomore, right? If Blake Fisher's as good as I think he is, and as good as people are telling me he is, he might be a 3-year player. I mean, he just might be, especially if he starts as a true freshman, because you really want to have that third year as a starter. And if he starts as a true freshman, then he'll have 3 years as a starter. So barring injury or just slow development, I think he'll be there. So now you're talking about some of these guys potentially battling to start as either a redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore in the 2021 class. When you look at like Joe Alt and those type of players. But to me, those guys are not – Joe Alt's got a high ceiling, but he needs a lot of work. I don't know if he's going to be ready physically then. And then you look at the other tackles in this class, a guy like Jake Taylor. Is Jake Taylor going to be ready to compete as a redshirt freshman? Maybe. I mean, I like Jake Taylor a lot. But, would Zach Rice be able to play? Yeah, he'd be able to play. But I think the key to that, Jason, as far as loading up would be, okay, well, then you take an extra guy and that increases your odds that somebody pans out. I mean, it's mathematics. The more talented players you get, the greater odds that you have that somebody pans out, and you only need really one guy because Tosh Baker will still be around by then. So tackle would be one. If I were to take 5 offensive linemen, I think they need at least one more guy that can play tackle. And then you have a couple guys that could potentially be swing tackles. Schrouth could maybe be a right tackle. Joey Tanona could maybe be a right tackle. Even if it's not their ideal position, they're guys that I think could do it. Because when I look at Michael Carmody playing tackle, I don't view Michael Carmody as a tackle. I think he's playing tackle out of necessity. The problem is that Notre Dame hasn't really prioritized tackles in the 2022 class. And from what I can tell so far, Jason, it's not a great tackle class, period, nationally. There's still some film to dive into, but it's a lot of the tackles that I've seen ranked as top tackles are guys that I look at and view a lot like Joey Tanona and Billy Schrouth and guys like that they're right tackles that could play guard. Like Joe Bruner is a highly ranked tackle. He's not a left tackle for me. I mean, he's a big, strong kid, great body. He's got a really awkward, like big torso, so he's kind of a natural waist bender. Good vertical burst off the line, but not the great lateral quickness that you want from an elite tackle. So I view him as more of a right tackle guard too, even though he's a highly ranked guy and it would look like he's a tackle based on his rankings. I think he's a lot like those guys that are like Shrouth and Tanona that are more sort of maybe their best days are going to be ahead of them in the inside. All right, and last question from Jason. I think you might have some more later, but in this early start, we know Notre Dame is going to get hit super hard with negative recruiting at wide receiver. What do you say to combat that? What can you do to not only fight it, but to turn around wide receiver recruiting? Well, I think the first thing you do is you have to talk about the opportunities that are going to be there for these guys when they show up. I mean, you look at the fact and you say, hey, look, here's the deal. We have Kevin Austin is a senior. Lawrence Keys is a senior. Braden Lindsey's a senior. Joe Wilkins is a senior. And Avery Davis is a fifth-year senior. There's a chance we could lose 5 of our top 6 receivers from our roster after this season. You have a chance to come in and play. And then you try to use – so the spin that people have given to try to justify Notre Dame's playing freshmen early, which, I don't buy, but, most of these kids don't study it like I do. You can point to, what Michael Floyd did as a freshman, even though it was before your time. You can point to TJ Jones. You can point to Kevin Stepherson. You can point to the fact that, Will Fuller was behind TJ Jones and Chris Brown and some really good players in 2013, DeVaris Daniels. And then by his sophomore year, he's, 1,000-yard guy. You can point to that and try to spin that and just say, hey, look, Jordan came. It didn't work out for him. We love him. We wish him the best. But here's the deal. Here's where we're at. And say that, he didn't really fit what we did. You could even say some things like he was recruited by our previous offensive coordinator. We're running a different system now. We need more dynamic players. We need guys that he was kind of a tweener. He was sort of a route runner, not a big guy, but not a dynamic athlete. So we need either a really big guy, Tobias Merriweather, CJ Williams, or we need a dynamic guy, Savion Bradshaw. So I think there's things they can do to spin it. But, at the end of the day, it's not even going to be about that. It's going to be about convincing the kid that he fits what you do schematically, that he connects with the players in the class, that he connects with you as coaches, and that you're able to lay out a clear vision of how he fits into your offense. At the end of the day, those are going to be the things that matters, not you convincing him from negative recruiting. I've always felt, Jason, that for the most part, negative recruiting works best on kids that ultimately don't want to go to your school. And you've been around this a long time, Jason. I know you followed recruiting forever, as have I. There's been plenty of times when kids get negatively recruited. Notre Dame gets hammered for different things about whatever the case may be. And what does Notre Dame do? They still get the kid. Because I think ultimately, if a kid really likes Notre Dame, they're not going to believe that stuff. They're going to listen to what the coaches are telling them. And as I said, the biggest thing that you can do is just have a very clear plan for what he is. I'll give you an example. So Alizé Mack this is when he was Alizé Jones at the time, when he was committed to UCLA. I talked to him, I'm trying to remember where it was. It might have been one of the All-Star games. But I'm interviewing him, and I'm asking him, what the difference was between Notre Dame and UCLA. And he said, when I went to Notre Dame, they had all this film of Tyler Eifert and past tight ends that they had used. And they could say, here's how we're going to use you. And they could show actual game clips of how they wanted to use him. He said at UCLA, it was all basically essentially on a chalkboard where they didn't have film of how they wanted to use me. They said, we're going to invent things for you. And at the end of the day, that's what sent him to Notre Dame. One of the reasons sent him to Notre Dame was he felt comfortable that they not only had a plan for him, but they knew how to carry that plan out. And that's the balance that Notre Dame is going to have to do. All right. Thomas Walsh has some advice on how to handle that. Reference all the NFL receivers of late from Notre Dame and get rid of Dell, and Tommy needs to completely wrestle the offensive way from Kelly if possible. All right, Jeff Salmon says, how many are on your silent commit list now? I can confidently say 2 for sure. I think that list could go as high as, let's see. So I would say I'd feel very comfortable saying 3. Guaranteed 2. Very comfortable saying 3. And if someone was to say it's 4, I'd say, yeah, I don't know if that kid's a silent commit. I think that kid has maybe told the staff, yeah, I'm coming, but I don't count that as a silent commit. But I say if you went to 4, I would buy that if that was the situation. Okay. Kevin Thomas says, we got Ziegler and Burnham already. Sneed, Cheeks, and Tuihalamaka would be a haul, though it's been said we may not take all of them. So, Kevin, just so you know, they won't take all of them is what I'm told. I've asked this question directly. Would you take all of them? And there's just not the room. And there's another question about that somebody brought up a question on that conversation. And I get where you're coming from, but see here. Okay, Jay said, all right, the staff would be crazy not to take all 3 of Cheeks, Sneed, and junior linebacker. I don't remember a time when Notre Dame had the chance to land that many studs in one class. I would take 5, in my opinion. From a pure talent standpoint, Jay, I don't disagree with you one bit. Neither does Notre Dame. But at this end of the day, you have to be able to make the roster work. And if you're going to take a 5th linebacker, you have to take away from somewhere else. And I don't know of a position where you can do that. They're already taken away from other positions. There's a chance they may only take 1 pure safety in this class because it's not a great year at safety nationally. There's more kind of hybrid corners than there are pure safeties. Some of the safeties they kind of like offense more. That's a problem. And so you're already kind of going to come up short numbers there, and you're going to have to find another safety either from your current roster or a 3rd corner in this class. You know, you're already coming up short, and they may only they may only be able to take 4 offensive linemen because of the numbers are being short. You're talking about, do you want to take a 5th linebacker or a 4th D end? You know, it's do you want to take that 5th linebacker? Well, here's the deal. If you take that 5th linebacker, let's say hypothetically that Notre Dame gets Sebastian Cheeks and Jalen Sneed. Hypothetically. If you take Junior Tuihalamaka, who I think is a heck of a football player, you can't take Tyson, or excuse me, you can't take Cyrus Moss. You can't take that many front 7 players. You're talking about taking then, you'd have 4 defensive ends, a defensive tackle be 5. You can't take 10 front 7 players in one class. You just can't. Especially in a class it's going to be hard for them to get up to 25. Almost half your class is going to be front 7 guys. So while I understand your problem or your comment, basically what is exciting about this is Notre Dame is now at linebacker in the position that Alabama and Ohio State find themselves in every year, in that they're going to have to turn away a stud. They just are. They can't afford to take all those guys. I think that's a great position to be in. And just so that we're clear, you know, you already have a top 100 player in Josh Burnham. You already have a natural rover in Nolan Ziegler. I think Notre Dame is in a great spot, but you just can't load up, because what can happen, Jay, is if you take too many kids, well, somebody's probably going to want to bounce in a year or two because they're not playing. So you balance it out. You have to spread it out. And if Marcus Freeman is the recruiter that we all think he is, and that he's proven himself to be because of this conversation, well, there's going to be linebackers next year that Notre Dame can go get. And I'd rather see 4 this year because of the positional flexibility these guys bring. I mean, I think you could make a case numbers-wise that you only bring in 3. I think going to 4 is them pushing because it's so loaded. But I think at the end of the day, you just can't go to 5 because it really hurts the balance of the class. John A1 says, really appreciate the live chats. When I'm not at work, I always tune in. Thank you, Irish Breakdown. What does the safety board look like? Is Notre Dame in good position? John, I appreciate the super chat very much. So let's talk about the safety big board. And we went over the 4 names that I had on my sort of work to-do list. And I think those are the 4 that based on what I've talked, some conversations I've had, I feel like these are the 4 Notre Dame likes the most. So obviously, Xavier Nwakpa is numero uno. Sherrod Colville from Virginia, Jake Pope from Georgia, and KJ Winston from DC. I think those are the 4 that are at the top of the board. I would tell you this, John. I think that Notre Dame is in the mix with all of them. I think that Notre Dame is at least in the top 4 for all of them. That's a great place to be in. That makes me feel confident they're going to get at least one of them. Will they get 2 of them? I think they'd like to get 2, but I don't think there's a great deal of confidence that they're going to get 2 because of the fact that, like I said, that it's not a great safety class, and they're in the top 4 with all of them, in my opinion. But they're 3rd or 4th with most of them. So there's work to do. So I like the guys that are on the board. I think if you get at least one of those guys, and then you get the two corners we talked about earlier in Devin Moore. And for those who maybe have joined the show late, here's the board that I shared earlier of this is my hot board. These are the guys that I am confident in right now that Notre Dame is in the best position with. So I'm going to get rid of that so we can see all of them. That's where I think Notre Dame is in that regard. So I think with taking that would get them the 3. So if you get these two guys right here, John, that gets you to 3 corners. And you've got 2 corners that have some safety potential or nickel potential, because I think Jaden Mickey could also be a really good nickel on top of being an outside field corner. But then also, if you get those 3 guys, it then gives you some flexibility with last year's class. So maybe a Chance Tucker, maybe Philip Riley, one of those guys could say, hey, look, we really like this kid, and we feel like he's going to have a faster path to the field at safety than he will at corner. So let's give him a shot there. So I think that's where I see things with the corner board or safety board. There's work to be done, but the board is good, and so far getting good early returns on the relationships that Chris O'Leary's been able to build with players. Okay, here we go. Jay says, give me the big dog Lucas at D-tackle with all those game record defensive ends and linebackers and put the hurt on Clemson and OSU next year. I mean, Jay, I love what you're saying because it is true. I mean, Anthony Lucas is a game changer recruit. And then you've already got a really excellent DN class. You're going to have the best. In my opinion, that would make Notre Dame having the best linebacker class in the country. If you get 2 of those 3 guys, you're going to have the best linebacker class in the country. That's a heck of a front 7. And you got Prince Collie last year. You got Gabriel Rubio last year. You got the 2 young athletic kids in Schweitzer and Upau. You got Jason Onye. I mean, goodness gracious. It's exciting to think about what they're going to be doing up there. I'm going to skip these billboard questions for now, and we're going to talk about those here at the end. There's a question about linebackers I want to follow up on just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I know late at night people join at different times. MT41 says, since Notre Dame can't take Cheeks, Sneed, and Tuihalamaka, will they take the first 2 ready to commit? My understanding on this, MT, is that it is a first come, first serve situation, that there's not really a pecking order. So what that means is, and I know you know this, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Sometimes when you have a list of players you like, you say, okay, this is a guy that we have to have. And we like him so much more than the other players that if we have 3 players for 2 spots like you have now, you may take one. So, let's say that linebacker A is your top guy, but linebacker B and C both want to commit. So linebacker B decides to commit first, you take him. And then linebacker C wants to commit. You may tell him, hey, look, we're not ready to take your commitment yet. We're not sure where we are numbers wise. We told you we were filling up, and we just took player B's commitment. We got to wait to see what player A is going to do. You can do it that way. Another way to do it, if you know a kid wants to commit, you kind of not talk to him for a second. You get player A on the phone. You say, listen, here's the deal. You're our number 1 guy, but we have to take a 4th player at this position. We have to. We can't afford to miss. If you tell us that you want to be here, but whatever, then we'll wait for you. But if you're not sure of where we stand with you, then we just need to know now. He says, hey, coach, I like you guys, but right now I'm going to wait a while. Then you say, okay, we love you. And then you go take player C. And it's not a plan B guy. You love all of them, but just one guy is so much better than everybody else. So I think that's where we're at with that. And so in this situation, however, we love all of them. They're all player A's, and it's the first 2 that we're going to commit. And what that tells me is that with Josh Burnham, they're essentially going to fit Josh Burnham wherever the rest of the class shakes out. And if they get Cheeks and Sneed, and right now I would say that's probably, if I had to guess, that'd be the 2 I think would come, just based on timing and visits and other things. And then at that point in time, you say, okay, Josh, we're going to start you out at Mike. But if Junior Tuihalamaka decides he wants to make his decision sooner, then you can move Josh somewhere else. That's one of the things I love about Josh Burnham is he brings you that. He can make this class whole at linebacker because he's so versatile, and that's a very important thing to do. A lot of questions tonight. I want to get to all of them. I'm going to see or get past so we'll do the billboard stuff here in a little bit. Jay says, I won't complain about a corner class of Mickey Morrison and more. I wouldn't either. And I'll tell you something else, Jay. A year after getting Barnes, Riley, Johnson, and Tucker, that's what Notre Dame needs to do. Listen, so I've talked with people off the board. Jason and I have chatted about this kind of privately in that I don't feel Notre Dame is in a position, and we saw it with Kamari Rogers. I mean, Notre Dame did everything they could do to try to get Kamari Rogers. He was interested, but at the end of the day, he's like, it's just not what I want to do. Until Notre Dame can start, can develop somebody into a first-round pick, it's going to be tough sledding to get that elite corner. So option B is to get as many really good players as you can get. Get Ryan Barnes, Philip Riley, Chance Tucker, JoJo Johnson in one class, and then a year later get Morrison and Mickey and Devin Moore and say, hey, look, of that group, that's 7 guys. 1 or 2 of them are going to move positions. Somebody's going to be a safety. Somebody's going to be a nickel. Somebody's going to pan out and be a stud. Somebody's going to pan out and be a good starter. I mean, when you have that many good athletes and good players, somebody's going to be better than you think. And a perfect example is the 2016 class. So you signed 3 corners in that class. You signed Julian Love, Troy Pride, and Dante Vaughn, all 4-star players by the end of the process. One turns out to be a college star. One turns out to be a pretty good player. And then the other one turns out to be, solid, but now he's in the NFL. So all 3 of them are in the NFL, but they all played at varying levels. Well, if you only get 1 or 2 of those guys, I think overall it can hurt your depth. So the way that you recruit at Notre Dame at corner, if you can't get the studs, which right now, they're just not getting, then you have to do volume. But the thing I like about the volume, Jay, is it's volume of really good football players. It's not a bunch of projects. There's no Jaylen Browns. It's really good football players. Maybe they're not elite recruits, but they're really good football players. And I think that's what they have to do. I think that is the way that Notre Dame has to go. Jason says this, Shrouth reminds me of a longer version of Sean Swinar, who was a very good player and should have been an O-lineman, not a DT. I think he is a lot like Sean Swinar as a defensive lineman. I don't remember a lot of Sean Swinar as an offensive lineman, Jason, so I'm not arguing with you that he should have been an offensive lineman. But he was just a solid defensive lineman at Notre Dame. He's a good rotation player before the back injuries. That's Billy Shrouth if he wanted to play defensive line. He's not a Notre Dame kind of guy from a high-level standpoint, but if they got into a pinch and they had injuries and they had to move Billy Shrouth to nose tackle, he could hold his own. David Knight asks, so Devin Jackson is gone. Unless there's a new development that happened today, David, I don't know that he's gone. I just don't think that he's a priority for the staff. And I know why he's a fan favorite. I get it. I see the track times. I see what he's putting up in track. But there's track speed, and then there's can you play football? And I don't – his film is impressive in regards to he just fires off the edge. But he's not great in space. I watched him at a summer camp. He just doesn't have a real natural feel for coverage. Now, maybe he can get one. And in other years, Notre Dame would be able to wait for a kid like that. But when you have Cheeks, Snead, Burnham, Ziegler, and Tuihalamaka on the board, maybe none of those guys are as fast as he is on the track, but they're all better football players, and at least right now. And so to me, you take the better football players because of Notre Dame's depth chart issues, you have to take the more sure things. But those sure things have very high ceilings as well. So I'm gonna continue to be comfortable with that decision regarding Devin Jackson. Jason says, I think Moore is a free safety on the next level. Notre Dame needs to get to the point where they aren't putting guys that should be a safety at corner. I get what you're saying, but let me kind of play a little devil's advocate. I think ultimately Notre Dame would like to play a 3-corner defense. And when they go to a 3-3-5, have 5 true DBs on the field. I think the guy they would like to have in that nickel, if you go back and look what they did at Cincinnati, at first I thought they were using safeties. As I did more research, it looked like it was a bigger corner. I think when you look at a guy like Devin Moore, Jason, they view him as a guy that you give a shot to play outside, and if he doesn't stick, he doesn't stick. He can play free safety, but the other thing is I think they really like his potential as that slot guy because you could put a guy like JoJo Johnson there, Tariq Bracy there, those smaller, speedier cover guys, but they like the idea of having a bigger guy because that then allows them to be better against the run and better against the perimeter screen game, which so many teams like to do. usually good tacklers in space. I think that's why they're willing to give him the shot at corner. But at the same time, from my conversations, Jason, they're not going to be stubborn with him at corner. And he's not going to be stubborn at corner. It's, you want to play corner. We like you at corner. We think you can play corner, but we also like the fact that you can play other positions. And so if they were to get 3 corners and 1 safety in this class, Devin Moore is going to get a shot to play corner. And if he sticks, then you find somebody else to move. If he doesn't stick, then you move him, and he's fine with it. And I like that strategy. I'd like to see the bigger corners move to safety because you know this too, Jason. As much as you have to cover in the game today, and if you're especially going to play cover 1, your second safety, or if you go with a 5 defensive back look and you're going to have 3 safeties on the field, 2 of those guys have to cover, just flat out have to cover. And so I think why there's a premium on big corners that can also cover. Dwayne Gomez asks, how is Notre Dame doing on running back Singleton and Hayden? We talked a little bit about this earlier, Dwayne. I like where Notre Dame is at with Dallin Hayden. I'm a little bit more confident in him than I think most are from some conversations I've had. I think Ohio State is his leader, but I think it's a small margin. And I think if Notre Dame can continue between now and June 11th when he shows up for his visit, if they can continue making him a daily priority and continue to build that relationship, get the commits to build that relationship, you get him on campus on June 11th, you're going to have a shot to close the deal and make up that final outcome. And here's the other part of this that we're not talking about. Ohio State likes Dallin Hayden a lot. They like a lot of other backs. And they're in a situation where if you can just keep Dallin uncommitted long enough, Ohio State may remove themselves by getting another back. That's also part of this strategy for Notre Dame is put in the work to make sure that at the very least, if Dallin doesn't commit to you, that he doesn't commit to Ohio State, because eventually Ohio State's going to land somebody and they're going to take themselves out of the game. And then now you're in great position. So that to me is a strategy. Nicholas Singleton, I think Penn State's in a little better shape right now than Notre Dame. Ohio State's still in the mix, and I think Alabama's trying to make a push too. It sounds like Alabama wants to take 2 running backs in this class. They already have Emmanuel Henderson committed, but it sounds like they'd like to take another guy, and Nicholas Singleton's one of the guys that they're looking at right now. Okay, Jason says, Jason, I appreciate all these questions and comments, man. I really do. I love being able to talk football, and I love that you bring up this to the table every time. The modern college game puts a lot of stress on linebackers to play horizontal to the line of scrimmage and put more depth on their drops because of RPOs and faster tight ends. In my opinion, Notre Dame should pass on JR, put Burnham inside. I understand where you're coming from, but I keep teasing this article, so I'm going to get it, but I'm going to answer the question now because it's a very fair question. I think the fact that teams do so much horizontally and teams do so much RPOs, and that teams, as Tommy Rees has talked about, that they're looking to create spacing from a formational standpoint, it makes it harder and harder and harder to defend the run with your box. And that's why you see teams like Oklahoma run for so many yards, North Carolina run so many yards, that teams are going with these really fast athletic linebackers, and you can gash them. And I think there's a need in college football. You've seen it from Clemson. They've had some big thumper linebackers in recent years. I think that you saw it with the kid that Ohio State had last year. He wasn't a thumper, but the Harrison kid, but he was more of a box guy. I think there's a big need in college football in these elite defenses, especially if you're going to be a 3-3-5. If you're going to be a 3-3-5 and out of 3 defensive lineman personnel, your 4th middle linebacker has to be a thumper. He has to be that 4th insert into the line guy. So if you're going to go to 4-2-5 personnel or 4-3 personnel, then I could say, yeah, you can make a case that you need a little bit more speed because you have those 4D linemen. But even then, if you have a guy like Junior Tuihalamaka, who's big, who's physical, maybe he lacks the sideline range that you're referring to, and I would probably agree with that. But his tight end to tight end is what I like to call it because it's outside the tackles. But his tight end to tight end short area speed is impressive. His instincts are outstanding. He's going to play just as fast as any of the other linebackers from the tight end to tight end box, okay? And if you have a guy like that that's also big and physical and can take on guards, that's going to make you a lot more successful with 5-man boxes. And if you can be successful with 5-man boxes, then that's going to make you better because now you can protect the quick game with your outside linebackers and then protect the box with one or two of your safeties. Definitely one of your safeties. But if you have a smaller linebacker that's going to struggle to take on guards, especially in a 3-3-5, then there's a need to have that big thumper at middle linebacker. I would be perfectly fine if Josh Burnham ends up being their middle linebacker. Perfectly fine. But I believe as you see the transition to teams that are running RPOs and the spread, that the RPO in the perimeter spread game is actually creating a greater need for the Manti Te'o type of player, because you can now better defend the box with fewer players, if that makes sense. So you may disagree with that, and I understand it, but that's why I do view Junior Tuihalamaka in a little greater light than some others do, because I think he brings a tremendous need. Bill Walsh. So I talked about the safety position. Bill, do me a favor. If you heard me talk about it last time, just let me know. If you came in late and missed my safety conversation, just tell me that too, and I'll get to it when I see your question, because we've talked about that a couple times, and I'm just not sure when you jumped in. Okay, so Jason says 5 linebackers this class makes sense if you only take Bowen next year and Kaya never makes it from the mission. I think there's something to that. I'd still feel really uncomfortable taking him, taking 5 in this class, just from a number standpoint, making it work a linebacker, but also making it work for the 2022 class as a whole. Okay, here we go. Jason says, the problem with Williams and Merriweather is that neither are explosive, fast, or have long speed. They don't close the gap with Clemson, Bama, Ohio State. All have individual talent. Not a great class. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on Merriweather. And this is a conversation that I've had a lot in the last couple of years, and there are 2 ways to be big-time vertical threats. One is to be fast. It's a Will Fuller type of player. It's Hollywood Brown. It's the guys that Alabama puts on the field. It's Jerry Jeudy and guys like that even though Jerry Jeudy wasn't a Henry Ruggs, I mean, he still was in the 4.4s. I think Devontae probably would have ran a 4.4 if he would have ran a combine. But they're not the typical burners. The other way to do it is to have guys that do have long speed, the taller, longer guys. And I believe that the disagreement I have, number one, is I do think Tobias Merriweather has very good long speed. He's a lot like Miles Boykin, although I would say his long speed in high school is even better than Miles Boykin. But when you look at what, for example, T. Higgins did in I'm trying to pull up his pro day numbers just to get the specific number, but T. Higgins, I believe, ran a mid to high 4.5 at his pro day last year. So here we go. NFL Combine results. His 40 time was a 4 at his pro day. T. Higgins was a 4.59. He was an outstanding college football player. He was a part of a championship football team that had some big moments in big games. And you look at T. Higgins in his career as a senior or as a junior at Clemson, he caught 59 balls for 1,167 yards, 13 touchdowns, averaged 19.8 yards per catch. He was a guy that, to me, was a big play guy. Had 3 catches for 52 yards against LSU in 2018. He had 59 catches for 936 yards, 15.9 yards per catch. Against Alabama, he had in the title game, he had 3 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. It's 27 yards a pop. In the 2 playoff games that year, he had a combined 7 catches for 134 yards. He averaged over 20 yards a catch in the postseason. To me, and then in 2017, he averaged 20.3 yards per catch on 17 catches as a true freshman. So to me, when I look at Tobias Merriweather, and I've written this for months from the first time I did an evaluation on him, that's who he reminds me of, because he's not a guy that's just going to take a crossing route and outrun everybody, but his long speed is impressive. And he's a guy that can do damage on posts and goes and win one-on-ones and get those drag routes where once he gets that speed going, he's a guy that can make big plays. So I do think he has that. Having said that, the side where I'm going to then be on your side is, if your recruiting class is Williams, Walker, and Merriweather, you don't have that dynamic after the catch guy. And I think it would be a good receiver class, but it's not a receiver class that's moving the needle, even though the individual players are very good. You need Xavion Bradshaw at receiver in this class. You have to, because even though you and I disagree on Tobias Merriweather's long speed and whether that is good in college, and I think that it is, none of those guys are that dynamic RPO type of weapon, screen type of weapon, just making teams have to chase you across the field type of weapon. None of those guys are that. And I believe that Notre Dame does that. Does need that, and none of those guys would provide that. You'd have a Juju Smith type, you'd have a T. Higgins type, and you'd have I don't know how you'd classify Maureen Walker, but who's your Jerry Jeudy? Who's your Will Fuller? Who's your Devontae Smith? Who is your Hunter Renfrow? Who is your Amari Rogers? Who's your Chris Olave? Who's the kid that Ohio State had a couple years ago? The McLaurin kid. Who is that for you? You don't have that guy, and I think you need that guy. They just don't have that type of player. You look at LSU and say, well, LSU didn't have that type of guy. Yeah, but LSU's I know, Jason, I think you'd agree with me on this. LSU had big receivers, but they had big receivers that could flat out run. They were dynamic vertical guys. Jamar Chase was a 4.4. Justin Jefferson was a 4.4. Those guys could flat out fly. And T. Higgins isn't that type of guy. You can't have 3 T. Higgins. You can have 3 Justin Jeffersons. And that's the difference. It's about creating the type of recruiting or receiver crew, the core, that would be successful. And you could have 3 really good players there. But if they're all kind of the same guy, it limits what you can do offensively, which is, I believe, the point that you're making, which we are on the same page for. Andy Arena says, I think we are the clear favorite for Merriweather right now. And Andy, I would not necessarily dispute that. My point, however, is that if he is in fact going to wait till January to commit, you're in a situation now where you may be his clear leader now. But what if Clemson or Ohio State or Alabama or Texas or somebody like that misses on some of their top guys, or he has a breakout senior year and all of a sudden they want to make a run for him? Well, now you're having to fight those schools off, right? And so that's why I'm not putting him in the category as the confident group or the group of the hot board group, the guys that I think they're going to get, just because from a timing standpoint. You have to hold off other schools for 8-9 months compared to some of these guys are going to decide this summer, where you got to win for the next 2-3 months. You got to win. And that's why I think we need to be thinking about it's a little bit of a different situation, and why I'm saying it's just too early. He's in the too early with that group. Sean Rogers, is Notre Dame leading for any top corners in 2022? I think Benjamin Morrison and Devin Moore fit that category. So I would say that they lead for him. Here he said, Sean Rogers says, if you could get 2 receivers in the 22 class, which 2 would they be? Give me Xavier Bradshaw and either one of Tobias Merriweather and CJ Williams. Give me either one of them. Right now I have CJ, I think, is a little bit better player today. I think Tobias has the higher ceiling. And as y'all know, I'm a ceiling guy. If it comes down where 2 guys are close, give me the higher ceiling guy if it's a significant. And I think Tobias Merriweather's ceiling is extremely high. Again, he's T. Higgins, in my opinion. That's the kind of ceiling he can have. And T. Higgins was a heck of a football player. If you can give me T. Higgins and if you give me, Tobias Merriweather or C.J. Williams, one of those 2 with Xavier Bradshaw, I'm a happy guy. And in a perfect world, honestly, Sean, I'd take all of them. And I'll tell you this: if it came down to, and I'm Jason, I'd be curious to get your opinion on this since you've talked a lot about this. If it came down to you have 1 spot left, you've got, let's say they get Junior Tuihalamaka and Sebastian Cheeks. They get CJ Williams and Xavier Bradshaw. You have 1 scholarship left. It's either Jalen Sneed or Tobias Merriweather. I'm taking Tobias Merriweather because I think there's a bigger need at receiver to just get some high upside guys, just for me personally. I'm sure some other people disagree with that, and it'd be a heck of a debate to have, and it'd be a good problem to have. But that's kind of how I look at it. Why I'd rather take a 4th receiver and take all 3 of those guys than to take a 5th linebacker. D-Rock Irish, you are correct. It only takes seconds. Hit the like button, follow and subscribe with the notification. Appreciate that very, very much. Thomas, I am sorry for doing that to you with the PTSD moment when I mentioned Dracovic. That's my bad. I know you're not alone there. Every time I bring up Phil's name to my dad, he gets all ticked off and fired up about it. Here we go. Sean Rogers says, this is a good question, Sean. Your top 3 recruits on defense that would really close the gap, guys Notre Dame needs to get. And I assume you're talking about uncommitted players. So that's what I'm going to focus on. If Notre Dame could get, I'm going to give you 1 on each level. give me Anthony Lucas, and I hate doing this because I really like Cyrus Moss a lot, but give me Anthony Lucas, give me Jalen Sneed, give me Xavier Nwankpa. If Notre Dame got those three guys, along with some other good players, but if they get those three guys to go with Tyson Ford and Darren Agu and Aiden Gabera and Josh Burnham and Nolan Ziegler and Jaden Mickey, boy, that'd be one heck of a defensive haul. And that would be automatic. Like if Brian Kelly doesn't walk into Marcus Freeman's office and say, hey, you're getting a pay raise, and then walk right over to Mike Mickens' office and say, hey, your office, and say, you're getting a pay raise, and then head over to Mike Elson's office and say, you're getting a pay raise, and then do the same thing to Chris O'Leary, which would probably be the easiest one to give a pay raise to. But that would be one heck of a haul, in my opinion. Okay, Co Cronin, thanks for joining the show today. Is there anyone on the outside looking in for 2022 that Notre Dame could sneak up on? For example, Zach Rice or Gavin Sawchuk. I think the two you gave are great examples. I believe if Notre Dame can get Zach Rice on campus, they're going to have a really good shot there. I think Gavin Sawchuk's a guy that they can make a rush for. I think that, but I don't view them on the outside looking in for Gavin Sawchuk. I think there are other schools he likes a little better, at least as the latest I've heard. Notre Dame is at best sort of on the same level. So I don't view them as on the outside looking in. To me, it's hard to say because I think there's so many guys that they're in a good place for. But I'd say maybe an offensive lineman would be one. Zach Rice is a good name that I would go to. Cyrus Moss, I don't think they're on the outside looking in. Nwankpa, they're not on the outside looking in. I feel like they've really positioned themselves with a lot of good players. I think if it were to be that guy's I think it'd be someone maybe we don't know a lot about right now. Maybe someone that's going to have a breakout season. But I mean, Anthony Lucas, they're already in great shape with. I think a lot of those guys, other than Zach Rice, I think those are guys that maybe you're looking at as we're kind of talking. I'm going to look through the offer list and see if anybody pops out to me. But I just, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. I think Notre Dame's already kind of put themselves in a good shape with a lot of those guys that they're on. I mean, they're within striking distance for a outstanding class. Cole Cronin says, is Notre Dame trying to flip Jair Brown still? We need to get a good corner since Kamari is out for Notre Dame. Well, number one, I know they're still trying, but as most of you know, Jair went through a personal tragedy lately. He lost his father, and I think that's made it a little challenging for schools to try to focus on recruiting with him right now. I don't know how much he's focusing on recruiting. That was a relatively recent thing that happened the week before we went in April. We went to the Columbus Under Armour camp, so I'm not sure how much they're doing that. But again, I really like if you give me a trio of Jaden Mickey, Benjamin Morrison, and Devin Moore to go with the kids they got last year that I'm very high on. I feel really good about that. Okay, he also asked, for safety and DB recruiting out of Nwankpa, Pope, Martinez, and Morrison, which ones do you see at Notre Dame and which do you rank them in order of must land? Look, I think Notre Dame can get all of them. I think it's going to be – I think that Nwankpa's going to be the most difficult. Morrison's the most likely. Martinez, to me, is maybe could end up being an odd man out. And then Pope, I like where Notre Dame is at. They got to get him on campus and play him. So I'd say in order of must land of that group, it's Nwankpa clearly number one, Benjamin Morrison number two. He'd be number one at corner. And then I'd go Pope number three, and then Martinez number four. I like Nakai Martinez a lot. I worry about his projectability. He's a smaller kid. He's already kind of tough and strong. I don't know how much better he's going to get, whereas a guy like Benjamin Morrison has and Devin Moore, they have a lot of length. There's a lot of still growing into their body. There's still a lot of filling out. There's a lot more versatility, whereas Nakai is a field corner or a nickel. That is it. He's not going to move the free safety. He's not going to move to anywhere else, where those other guys have a lot more positional flexibility, which is why I personally like them more, in my opinion. But, Jake Pope's another guy. He could play receiver. If you got into a pinch, we had a question the other day when we did the Jordan Johnson podcast where people asked, about maybe moving somebody. Well, if Notre Dame got Jake Pope and they got into a similar situation in a couple of years where, they had to go out and possibly move someone to that position, then yeah, I could see it being a situation where you could move Jake Pope and he could be a pretty good football player receiver, but as he's safety is where he's at. John Monty, appreciate you being in the show, buddy. We will definitely keep up the good work. Go asks, hypothetical situation. If Notre Dame had one wide receiver spot left and they had to choose between Tobias Merriweather and CJ Williams, who would you take? To kind of earlier, if I can only take one of the two, I'd probably take Tobias Merriweather because I think he's got a higher ceiling. That's probably who I'd go with. KMA says, if Notre Dame gets Stacey Raridan to tight end, would that be the best tight end class in the nation? It would be the best tight end class right now. I'd have to see kind of who other people have. I mean, I don't know if it'd be the number one in the country, but I'd like it. And it's not a great tight end year. And to me, those are two of the better tight ends I've seen on film so far. But I'd have to take a look at some of the other schools and who they've landed up to this point in time. So, and then, Cole, we talked about the 5 linebackers earlier. See here. And Billy Johnson, I see your question, Billy. So I want to kind of nuance this a little bit. I don't think Notre Dame has a problem developing receivers. I think Notre Dame has a pace problem when it comes to developing receivers. I think ultimately most of these receivers, by the time they're done, reach their peak. I mean, since Coach Alexander's been here, we've seen Equanimous St. Brown get drafted in the 6th round. He's in the NFL. Miles Boykin had a really good senior year. He got drafted in the 3rd round, I believe. We saw Chase Claypool late his junior year start to emerge, and then as a senior had a big senior year. We saw Javon McKinley have a big, really good 5th year. So guys are developing. The problem is that it's taking guys too long to develop. That's the bigger issue that I have. Whereas you're not doing a good enough job getting those guys ready to play in year 1 and year 2, but they eventually develop. And I think that's the bigger issue. So I wouldn't say they never seem to develop. I think they're all developing. It's taking way too long for them all to develop. And to me, that's the bigger problem. And that's why, I would have liked to, instead of Miles Boykin having 1 great year plus 1 game, I would have rather seen him have 2 productive years, or maybe a 3rd really productive year from Chase Claypool. He had a nice sophomore year, but maybe you could have done more with him. You take better advantage of having Javon McKinley, which is not entirely their fault because Javon had a lot of injuries. He was starting to emerge in 2019 and got hurt again. So I think that is to me my bigger issue. Co asks, if you had to choose between Jake Taylor, Carson Hinsman, and Billy Schrouth for a spot in the class, which one would you take? Well, the good news, Co, is I don't have to answer your question because I don't think they're going to be in a situation where they'd have to choose between those 3 guys. I think that they would take all 3 of them. At least according to my sources, that they would go up to 5 with the right guys. And if they got Hinsman and Schrouth first, and then Taylor wanted to come later, they'd take them. They would absolutely take them. And so I'm gonna cop out a little bit on this one, Cole, and say I'm not picking that one because number one, they're different players. Hinsman, I think, is more of a center. I think Schrouth is more of a guard, and Jake Taylor's more of a tackle. And so they're just different guys. I think that if your need was at a tackle, then you take Jake Taylor. If you have needed a more of an interior guy, then you pick between Carson Hinsman and Billy Schrouth is kind of the way you look at it. KMA Preston, is Nicholas Anderson a take at Notre Dame, or do they want to see how other recruiting battles play out? I think they want to see how other recruiting battles play out. That's my understanding from some conversations that I've had. Sean Rogers says, Xavier Bradshaw is a must-get, in my opinion. I believe 100%. Jason answers Co's question. He says, Taylor, because he's a pure tackle. And again, if that's your need, then yes. And Jason's argument has been that they need more tackles. So I understand you say that. But that's my point is you're not going to pick between those 3 guys for one spot because you're recruiting them to play different positions. And then he says, would Notre Dame take Anderson over Bradshaw or the other way around? My understanding is that Bradshaw is the bigger need and priority than Nicholas Anderson. KMA Preston, is Notre Dame still recruiting Quinshon Judkins? Yes, they are. As of last week, they still were. Okay. Co Cronin says, if Sawchuk, Singleton, and Hayden happen to go elsewhere, who would Notre Dame look for as a replacement? I think they would continue recruiting guys that are already on the board, Co. I think they would look at Quinshon Judkins, who was just asked about, maybe Jabron Payne, but I don't think they would force the issue with a second back. I think part of the reason they're going to take 2 backs in this class is because it's a really good running back class. And because the depth chart still needs a little bit more of an infusion. But I think they'd be perfectly fine just taking Jadarian Price. And if that's all they got, they'd be happy. Look, they're not taking 2 backs because they don't think Jadarian Price is a really good football player. They're taking 2 backs because overall the depth chart needs more players. But I don't think they're going to force it like, oh, shoot, we missed out on him. We have to go find somebody. If they don't get one of those top 3 backs and they don't get Quinshon Judkins, I could see the staff just saying, I will use a scholarship somewhere else. And now all of a sudden, maybe you can bring that 4th wide receiver in. And honestly, that's what I do. If you have room for 2 backs and you don't get one of the big 3, and I like Quinshon Judkins a lot. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a heck of a player. But you just got Logan Diggs. You just got Aldrick Estime. You've already got Jadarian Price. As much as I like Quinshon Judkins, I don't think he's necessarily above any of those guys. He's kind of on their level. So I'd say take that scholarship and use it for a 4th receiver, especially now that Jordan Johnson's gone. Now go get Tobias Merriweather and C.J. Williams and Xavier Bradshaw. That's what I would do. All right, here we go. KMA Preston, is there anyone high on Notre Dame that most of us fans don't know about yet? Well, KMA, I hope that these chats have been enough to where we've been able to really get you guys caught up on everybody that Notre Dame is on. There is a cornerback that Notre Dame is supposedly going to get a visit from Tennessee. I don't throw his name out there yet because I'm still trying to clarify with the kid, get confirmation with the kid that he's going to visit. But there's a corner out there that I've heard might visit in the summer. So we'll see how that plays out. If this 22 safety class isn't great, could Notre Dame look at the transfer portal to address the position in the future? Yes, they could. I would say, however, KMA or actually it's Preston. I know your name's Preston. So Preston, what I would say is, I think with the numbers they took at corner last year, 4 corners, with the fact that KJ Wallace has an extra year of eligibility because of the COVID year, you've got 2 freshmen on the roster right now, and Justin Walters and Kari G, who I think are both good football players. And you've got enough of those, some of those corners you got last year. I think Tucker, Barnes, and Riley could all play safety if they needed to and play it well. I think if you get 3 corners in this class, there's 2 of those guys that could potentially play safety. I think you have enough guys on the roster already that you say that I'm a big believer, develop your players. And I'll ask this. Outside of quarterback, name the transfers that have had an impact at Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, even Oklahoma, really. It's very few. Those schools are recruiting top players and developing those players. I don't think Notre Dame wants to get into this black hole of you keep taking grad transfers and that slows down your development of other players. Coach those kids up, get them ready to play. And if there's a personnel loss, somebody gets hurt, something like that, then sure, go do that. But that's what they've got enough talent that I'd say coach it up. And again, John A01, I'm here to your super chat. I really appreciate you doing that. Really means a lot to support the channel that way. Really appreciate that. Mason says Trey Edwards and Bowen in 2023, 2 5-star linebackers. And Mason, to your point, that's why I don't think they need to force the issue of the 5th linebacker. You got one of the best linebackers in the country in your state, right down the street. And Trey Edwards is another guy that they've offered. I mean, there's some good linebackers that the staff is already on. I mean, they've offered Drake Bowen, they've offered Javon Brown, they've offered Malik Bryant from Florida, Trey Edwards you talked about. They've offered Troy Ford Jr., Josiah Trotter. So I would try to balance it out, and I understand the whole bird and the bird in the hand thing, but that's what I think the 4th linebacker is. I don't think the staff set out to recruit 4 linebackers in this class. It's just such a good year at linebacker, and Marcus Freeman did such a home run job. I mean, look, Jalen Sneed and Junior Tuihalamaka weren't even on the radar when he got hired. So I think that's a great place to be. Jonathan says, is it Kazmarek? Is that how you say your name? Hopefully I'm getting that right, Jonathan. I apologize if not. I think I say we need receivers. That is absolutely correct. Preston says, is Notre Dame leading for anyone in the 2023 class? I mean, there's some guys in a good position with. I don't see them in commit mode right now with anybody right now. I think there's a couple positions that if Notre Dame hits on very soon, you're going to see them try to fill up moving forward. Bill Walsh asks if they get both Stace and Raridan after getting Barong and Evans, which one is the future first rounder? We need one of those guys every couple of years. Honestly, Bill, from that group, I see 3 guys that could eventually develop into first-round players, and that would be Barong and then the 2 from this year. Now, I'm not projecting they will, but I think all of them have, to me, 4.5 to 5-star upside, and that is a guy that could potentially be a first-round pick. So, and I think John McNulty, although he needs a little bit of work on the recruiting trail, I think he's a heck of a football coach as a position coach. And the fact that he's coached NFL tight ends is going to give those guys even more benefit. Look, the fact that John McNulty was Tommy Tremble's position coach and he can get on the phone and call these NFL teams, they know he's coached tight ends. He can say, look, kid's raw, needs work, but I'm telling you, this kid's got a lot to work with. I wish I could have coached him for one more year. And all of a sudden it seems, oh, okay. You know, it's kind of like when Harry Heastand was giving recommendations for offensive linemen. He coached in the NFL. He knows those guys. And so that's going to mean something. And the same thing for John McNulty as long as he's at Notre Dame. Okay. All right, Jeff, I see your question. You've been dragging your feet long enough. When is the IB merch coming out? Jeff, I said this in yesterday's podcast. I'm in the final stages. This is an example of it, right? So my wife is currently building my e-commerce store. I'm also in the process of getting a couple of the companies that have the type of gear that I want. So right now we're working on a couple hats. I've got a trucker hat that's kind of like this. That's a snapback hat on the store. I've got a fitted baseball, like an old baseball cap that's going to be like navy blue. And then some of them, I also have a pink one. So, like maybe during the breast cancer awareness, or if there's any ladies out there that like pink hats, I only put in there because my wife likes the pink hat. So that was kind of her idea, but she really liked it. But so I have that. I've got a polo. I've got this mug. It's going to be on there. We have got a tumbler that I'm working on the redesign. I just got that in the other day. It's really nice quality, but I had the IB logo and then Irish Breakdown went around it. I didn't like the look. So my wife's going to try to redesign it to have the IB and then Irish Breakdown. So it's all kind of there. But I have a tumbler, and then I'm trying to find a company that makes good hoodies. The problem is a lot of the hoodies that I've been able to find are really poor quality. And honestly, if I'm going to sell something with my company's logo on it, I want it to be good quality. And if y'all are going to spend your hard-earned money on our stuff, then I want it to be good quality. And so I have the hats have been ordered. The polo has been ordered. I've got the mug, as you see. The tumbler came in. And I'm trying to find the hoodie, but once I get those shirts and the hats in, if I like the quality, if the logo, if the design looks good, the stitching looks good, then we're going to launch the store. So we are in the final process of doing that, but that's what's taking so long for right now. So please be patient. I promise you it'll be worth the wait. Cause I want to make sure it's good quality stuff. David Knight asks, can Ziegler play Rover, a big 6'4", looking to clean your face off your head? I love it. Yes, he's actually being recruited to play Rover. I've talked with sources very close to Nolan Ziegler, and he is absolutely, Rover was the pitch from Clark Lee, and Rover has been the pitch from Marcus Freeman. And remember, Marcus Freeman recruited Nolan Ziegler at Cincinnati as well. So there was already a relationship there. And I think that athleticism. Yeah, Thomas, I liked that comment. Clean your face off your head. That was awesome. So Preston, I'm trying to figure this one out. I talked to Eric Rutter tonight, and I've got Eric trying to track this one down. Notre Dame has offered Ephesians Prysock, and my understanding is they're recruiting him. He's a teammate of Junior Tuihalamaka. I talked to a buddy of mine out in California. He said that there's some interest there. I just don't know how much. So I'm still trying to find that out. I think Notre Dame has some interest in him. It's still very early. I don't think he's quite with those other guys, but I'm trying to find out just what that interest level is, and then on the other side, what his interest level is. Okay, here we go. David Knight, does Justin Walters remind you of a Johnny Sanders? David, that's a little bit too early for me. I remember a Johnny, but I was young when a Johnny played. So I was more in fan mode than I was like coach evaluation mode. So you tell me if he reminds you of him and tell me why. And if anybody else remembers a Johnny, let me know. Do you think that Justin Walters remind you of a Johnny Sanders? If a Johnny Sanders was the guy who's going to fly downhill and take your head off, then yes, because that's what I think Justin Walters could be. Jason says the 5-star quarterback Malachi Nelson was announced he's committing on July 18th. It's not Indy. We'll see. We'll see how it is. But the point is, Jason, is they just offered him today. I wasn't anticipating Notre Dame getting him. The point is there's a lot of stud quarterbacks out there. And what's going to happen is you can't have all of them. Somebody's going to get an opportunity. And to me, the 7th or 8th best quarterback in the 2023 class is going to be better than the 2nd, 3rd quarterback in the 2022 class, based on how it's looking right now. Okay, Jonathan says, I think our defense is set up to be solid for years to come. What concerns me more at this point is the offense. Great teams put up 40 points a game. We just aren't doing that typically. And I agree with that. I do think that they're taking strides. I think that, we talked about this. If you haven't watched, Jonathan, check out my Saturday post Blue Gold game podcast. We talked a little bit about it today as well. I definitely am seeing changes offensively, but that's why it's so important that they recruit the guys we talked about. Get Tobias Merriweather, get Xavier Bradshaw, get these top quarterbacks in 2023, develop Tyler Buckner, you recruit top linemen, and then improve your scheme, enhance your scheme to the point where you can go out and you can compete for those guys. All righty. Let's see here. So Preston says, who are Indy's backup options on the offensive line if we don't land guys like Jake? That'd be Jake Taylor, Hinsman, Bruner. I would add Billy Schrauth to that category. I think that's where a guy like George Fitzpatrick comes into the conversation. I think that's a guy that Notre Dame likes. I believe he visited in April. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he's kind of that type of guy. I think you could look at, I don't honestly, other than Fitzpatrick, I don't know if Notre Dame is necessarily focusing on a lot of plan B guys or backup guys. Because like I said, they've already got 2 in the class. They need 4. They'd like to get 5. You're in a situation where you've got Tanona and Chan. I think they're in great shape with Billy Schrauth. Great shape. And then after that, it's between Carson Hinsman, Zach Rice, Jake Taylor. Trying to think. Okay, so we said Schrauth, Tanona, and Chan. I feel great about those 3. 2 are committed. I feel great about Schrauth. I think Notre Dame's the leader right now for Hinsman. After that, it's Jake Taylor, it's Zach Rice, it's Joe Bruner, and Emil Wagner. You have to get one of them to get to 5. I don't see a scenario in which Notre Dame doesn't, if they want 5 of that group, that they'll end up with 5. And I think they'll at least get 4. Here we go. Preston says, saw on 24/7, we have a crystal ball for 2023 DN Keon Keeley. What do you know about him? That's way too early for that. Having said that, we did have an update back in March, I believe, with Keon Keeley. Brian Smith, who contributes for Irish Breakdown, did an article with him. He is from the same high school that Nelson Aguilar's from, and the same high school that Nicholas Pettit-Frere is from. And Notre Dame is in a good place, but it's really early. Very high academic kid, very smart kid. Typical Notre Dame player, in my opinion, in that he's like 6'6", he's like 220, skinny kid, really great burst. He's that kind of that not developmental, like he's a 3-star. He's a highly ranked guy, like top 200 kind of guy. But that long, skinny, athletic guy that Notre Dame seems to really like, he fits that mold. Is Notre Dame in a position right now, Preston, where I'd say they're going to get a commitment from him soon? I don't think so. I think that's one of those things. So the way that the crystal balls work is the earlier you put it in, the more points you get when a kid commits. So if you put a crystal ball in for Notre Dame, because you say right now, even though he's probably 6 months, a year, or whatever away from committing, right now Notre Dame's in a great position. So I'm going to put it in, and if it stays that way, then I get a lot more points. If in 3 months it comes clear that Florida is his leader, then I flip it and switch my crystal ball to Florida, and I don't get as many points, but I still get it accurate. So I wouldn't put a whole lot in those type of things. But I understand why they do them early, and I think he's the kind of kid you say, if you look at some DNs, you say, hey, who is a DN in that class that you feel like Notre Dame could have a really good shot with? He's certainly one of those guys. He is, and they're offering a lot of really good players so far at defensive end. Okay, do you think the Notre Dame 2164? So you've been in both chats, buddy. Some of you have. I appreciate that. Do you think the 2022 linebacker class is an above-average class if we land 2 of the 3 that we're pursuing? No, it is not above-average linebacker class. Notre Dame 2164. That is an elite linebacker class. I would say this: if they get 2 of Cheeks, Sneed, and Tuihalamaka, if they get 2 of those 3. And you add it with Josh Burnham and Nolan Ziegler, I don't think there's going to be a better linebacker class in the country. I'll be hard-pressed to find one. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe. But I think that's going to be an elite linebacker class. And if somebody still disagrees with me, let me know. Tell me why you think it's not an elite class, but I think it would be. Jason agrees with me. Notre Dame will have an elite linebacker class no matter who the next two linebacker commits are from the list of guys you're on. And Jason, I think this is where you are with me. If they weren't on one of those other two guys, I think you'd be perfectly happy taking Junior Tuihalamaka. You just think those other two guys are better fits. Am I correct on that? So it's just that they're in a great position now at that point in time. Okay, Corey D asks, how do we keep Marcus Freeman from not taking a marquee job that will inevitably open up in the next year or two? So number one, my understanding is Marcus Freeman has given Notre Dame a 2-year commitment at least. And that means barring some like Michigan or Ohio State or something like that comes open, I don't see him leaving. My buddy is petrified he's going to leave for Virginia Tech. And I just said, it's not going to happen. I don't see that happening. I think he'll be here for at least 2 years. And I think after that, it's sort of does he feel like by staying and building Notre Dame, he's got an opportunity to be the next head coach here? I think that would be the thing that could keep him here. And of course, you keep throwing money at him. If he maintains the defense where it is, then he's already making great money. If he takes the defense to another level, you throw some more money at him, and you talk to him about, hey, maybe you're the next guy on. So Billy Johnson says it seems that Denbrock got more out of the wide receivers. I would agree with that. I think he got more out of them earlier. I think when people talk about like, well, Kevin Stepherson played and Will Fuller by his sophomore year and TJ Jones, well, who was the receivers coach for all those guys? It wasn't Del Alexander. All right, Preston, how many players is Notre Dame still trying to flip away from other schools? Honestly, they're not really focusing right now on flip guys because there's some really elite uncommitted guys that they're in on right now. Mason, let's do me a favor, Mason. If you're able to join the Friday chat, we can talk about Nana. But I do think that Nana is going to get a shot to be in the rotation this year. But he's going to be behind those other two guys right now. But from what I'm told, they're really liking what he's doing. Mason says, I don't really understand the Malachi Nelson offer. Pretty sure he's going to Oklahoma already, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know where he's going to committing. I don't see it being Notre Dame. Jason says he's going to commit on July 18th. There's no problem offering the kid. And sometimes offers are not just about that kid, but it's also about offering a kid from a region or a school that you want to make sure that you're in on. And see here. Okay. Amen to Bradshaw. He has the highest upside. I love Xavier Bradshaw. All right. Lewis Saban says, is Walker like Floyd? You talking about Michael Floyd? Because if the answer is if Michael Floyd, no, they're not even in the same. I mean, Michael Floyd was a 5-star top 25 player in the country. I mean, he was a beast. He was 190 plus physical. No, he's not. They're not in the same. They're not in the same universe, in my opinion. All right, how many wide receivers does Notre Dame plan on taking in the 22 Class 3 is the number right now. Now, again, as I said earlier, I wouldn't mind them getting 4 if it's the right situation. Like I said, if you don't get the big 3 at running back, if you don't get one of them, Sawchuk, Hayden, or Singleton, Hayden, Sawchuk, or Hayden, Singleton, whatever combination you view them, then to me, you use that scholarship to go get another receiver. That's what I do. If you can get Williams, Merriweather, and Bradshaw. I would not take a 4th if it meant like Nicholas Anderson or Joseph Griffin or Taylor Groves. Me personally, I would not take one of those guys right now. I'd focus on those 3 guys, and you get at least 2 of them. And if you get all 3 of them, then I'd figure out a way to make it work. Mason, was taking Walker this early a mistake? I said at the time I didn't think he's a guy you should have taken. Like Nicholas Anderson, for example, is a guy that I think is a better player than Walker right now. But in Notre Dame's defense, they see a guy with a very, very high ceiling. My thing is, I would have waited. Was it a mistake? I don't know. I just think they rushed it. And I feel bad saying it was a mistake because then it's like kind of insulting the kid. But they should have waited, in my opinion. Okay. And then Jason answers the question. He would take Merriweather because Freeman will obviously recruit linebacker well. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page. Okay, let's see some more questions here. A lot of good stuff tonight, everybody. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the people that gave super chats. Love support. Really appreciate that. Lewis Saban says he's talking about Michael Floyd and Walker, just thinking of a bigger body, not fast, but big with the 50-50 pass. So, Lewis, the difference here for me between Michael Floyd and Amorian Walker, when you just talk about just from the body type standpoint, Michael Floyd was like 185 to like 195 pounds as a junior. He was up to almost 200 pounds by the time he enrolled at Notre Dame. Morton Walker's like 170 pounds. He's still a pretty skinny kid. Now, the one-on-one, that stuff, okay, yeah, there's some similarities there. I see what you're saying there, but just the size, the body type is Michael Floyd is much thicker. Michael Floyd, I would disagree that he was not fast. This is something I always debated with people on. Michael Floyd was fast. He ran a 4.48 at his pro day, and I think he got a step slower. I mean, at the combine, I think he got a step slower at Notre Dame because he put on so much weight. Michael Floyd had a very weird running gait. He kind of had that galloping thing like Rod Smith for the Broncos had, and I think it made him look slower than he was. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I watched Michael Floyd for an entire week at the Army All-American Bowl, and I watched him going against Patrick Johnson. Remember Patrick Johnson, right, whose name is now Patrick Peterson? He went against all types of guys, and there was nobody that could cover him. And it was size, it was speed. He dominated the entire week. And that was one of the best receiving classes I've ever seen. When you talk about high school, it had Julio Jones, A.J. Green, Jonathan Baldwin was in that class. DeVere Posey was in that class. Justin Blackmon was in that class. He was super low ranked too. I mean, that was Dan Buckner. Remember him that went to Texas that was supposed to be a really good player? That was a phenomenal wide receiver class. And Michael Floyd, to me, was right there with those guys. I mean, he was a dominant player. There was one particular play, and I think it was Patrick Johnson. I could be wrong on this, but I think it was Patrick Johnson. It might have been somebody else. But I remember the All-Star game. He was just killing Boubacar Sissoko. I mean, it was unfair. It was like a D1 kid playing against a D3 kid. It was ridiculous. And there was a play, and again, I think it was Patrick Johnson. I'm going to go back and try to find the film. But basically, Patrick Johnson was sending Boubacar Sissoko to Michael Floyd's side every snap. And there was one particular play where they lined up, and Johnson got – and again, Patrick Johnson is now known as Patrick Peterson. He was matched up against Michael Floyd, and he couldn't switch. He backed up 10 yards off the ball. He wanted no part of Michael Floyd. So Michael Floyd was an elite special player. And his first 2 years in college, he was a big play guy. He was a 18, 19 yards per catch guy. He didn't become a possession guy till he got to Notre Dame. And it was more about how till Brian Kelly got to Notre Dame. And it was more about how he was used than it was about him having speed. Michael Floyd, for that size, could flat out run. And I don't think that he is on that category. All right, Jeff, did you get my answer earlier about where we're at with the gear? I promise you I'm putting in a lot of work to make this, but I don't want to just put up I don't want to launch a store and just have stuff, and then you guys are spending your hard-earned money to buy Irish Breakdown stuff and support my channel, and you're getting hats that are crap, bad stitching, more expensive than they should be. I want to make sure you're getting good stuff, and I'd rather take an extra month than for it to be done now and it just not be quality stuff. So hopefully you can understand that. Michael Johnson, hey, you've also been in both chats, Michael. Appreciate that. So is it that a coaching problem or player problem in wide receivers being productive? I think it's always a combination of both. I don't think I would ever say there's a situation where a player wasn't productive and it's 100% on the coaches. It's rare. Players always have a role and responsibility, but when I talk about the Jordan Johnson thing, it's more of this is happening consistently. And if it was just Jordan Johnson this happened to, then I'd be more likely to buy it's him. I don't buy that. I've heard enough things about the progress he's made off the field this spring, the play he had on the field to say it's not a player problem only. It's not a coaching problem only. I would put more of the responsibility on the coaches because it's their job to develop players. And again, it's part of that philosophy change that we talked about. All right, here we go. Omar Austin says, how big of a problem will it be if Notre Dame doesn't land a true offensive tackle in this class? Omar, they've already got one in Ty Chan. Now, he's a little bit of a low floor, high ceiling guy. If they don't get a second tackle in this class, I'd say that's a problem. And I don't mean a second tackle like a Billy Schrouth or a Joey Tenona that could play right tackle. I mean like a pure tackle like Jason's talking about, like a Jake Taylor type. If they don't get another one of those guys, I think that's problematic. It problematic from the degree that Notre Dame is going to – you could look at it and say, well, they're going to be okay because you got Blake Fisher's just a freshman and you've got Tosh Baker still has 4 years left. Say, okay, well, those guys could be around for a while. But again, if Blake Fisher is already starting as a true freshman, what are the odds that he's going to be here beyond this group's redshirt freshman year? I don't see it. So I think you need another tackle. Otherwise, it puts a ton of pressure on you next year that you have to land an elite tackle that can play early. So I think that they can recover from that. Brandon Coos, did Notre Dame move on from Caden Saunders? They're probably still talking to him. I haven't heard a lot about him. I just think it's one of those things where they realized it was just not worth the fight. DBZ is overseas. So he says, Coach, good morning from overseas. Thanks for doing these evening chats. So we're all hanging out at night and you're in the morning. Is that where we're at? And if you don't mind telling us, are you able to tell us where you're at? I know you said you're overseas. I'd love to find out where you're at. And if you just live over there, or if you're in the military, whatever the case, I'd love to kind of find out more about why you're not over here, or maybe you just live over there. I'd be curious about that. So Omar, you did say a top tier O tackle. Yeah, I agree with you, but I think Jake Taylor would be that guy. Corey D says, can Notre Dame with 1 or no 5 stars finish with a top 5 class? Yes, they can, but it's going to have to be like a 25-man class. It would be. And again, that's why I say I don't care as much about Notre Dame finishing with a top 5 class from a recruiting and ranking standpoint. Let's pretend that didn't happen, Corey. Okay, I'm gonna blame you for that. I don't care about them getting a top 5 class from a recruiting ranking standpoint, because there it's just all about points. You could finish with 1 offensive lineman, no quarterback, and no defensive ends, and have a top 5 class if you have 25 highly ranked guys enough. And so to me, I look at it and say, I want to see a balanced class, a class that I look at and say, name me 5 classes that you would trade for Notre Dame. That's what I care more about, as opposed to just the recruiting rankings standpoint. So DBZ says he's in Singapore on assignment, just moved here. So I take that in your military. My man, thank you so much. I appreciate your service and what you do for us very, very much. Means a lot to us. So you do what you do so that we can do these type of things and have some fun and be safe, man. So I really, really appreciate you and appreciate your service. Hey, I'm not sure who you are on Twitter, BZ, so do me a favor. If you know somebody that designs athletic gear, shoot me a DM. Okay, I'm at Coach D178. Shoot me a DM. My DMs are open. Anyone can hit me up. So hit me up on that, and I would love to hear what you have to say. Okay, here we go. Corey, I'm not going to get into the Alabama paying players thing. The NCAA wants no part of that. I mean, they don't care. This has been going on for a long, long time. Mason says Cardinal Tate is an absolute must get next year. Agree completely. Okay, so he says I would like a Yeti tumbler. So I don't have. I talked to someone the other day that said they might be able to get me in touch with someone about the Yeti tumblers, but that's not what we have. We have a different type. So I'm trying to pull up here the one that we designed, and I'll just kind of show you what it's looking like so far. Just so people can know that there is a merch store that I'm working on right now. Let me pull that up over here. So I'm gonna. What in the hell? Okay. Sorry, guys. Having some issues here. Okay. So here we go. Okay, I apologize, everyone. StreamYard is acting really crazy tonight. I apologize. Pardon my language. I hope my mom's not watching. Otherwise, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble here. So I'm going to try to pull this up. I don't know what happened. I just got logged in twice to this. So I'm going to try to pull this up here and show you some of the products that we're working on, and I'm going to show you the tumbler that we have, just so you all can see that we are making progress here with this. So, Jason, this would be the tumbler that we have right now. Like I said, I do have someone that's looking at possibly trying to get me with Yeti. I don't know if that's going to work out or not, but that is it. And then you see the mugs, there's the polo, there's the hats, and then a visor. So those are the things that we're working on right now. And then, like I said, we're trying to find a hoodie, and they'll probably do a T-shirt. But if you guys have some suggestions for things you'd like, let me know, and we'll keep working on it. So again, I apologize for the little issues that we've had here late tonight. Really, really do apologize for that, and for the language. I'm just a little frustrated that keeps booting me out. But here we go. Does Notre Dame tell recruits that they are the most famous and well-known team in college football who plays on national TV every week? Yes. Notre Dame, yes, they sell that. They sell that pretty well. Okay, Preston, right? Yeah, can't have any more 12-7 games like that. You are absolutely right. All right. Okay, CBAM says, how much does our lack of an explosive offense the last couple of years hurt Notre Dame on the recruiting trail on offense? I think it hurts. I do. I think when you're a top receiver, you're a top back or top quarterback, and you look at the production that Notre Dame has, and you say, well, I mean, why would I go there and score 33 points a game when I could go to Oklahoma and score 48, or LSU and score 48, or Clemson and score 48? So I do think it hurts, and I think the lack of consistent production at receiver. I mean, you've had some guys here and there. You had Will Fuller, and then you had Boykin went round 3 and Claypool went round 2, but like somebody mentioned earlier, I mean, Alabama had 4 receivers in the same class that got drafted, and they all win the first round. I mean, that's just absurd. And I'm not saying Notre Dame has to do that, but they got to start scoring more points, and they have to do so, and start producing more skill players in the NFL if people are gonna like it. Here we go. Preston says, do you think Notre Dame will have more chances with top 5-star guys in 2023 with the way we have been recruiting earlier and more aggressively? If they want more 5-star guys, sure. But again, I don't think that's necessarily the concern that Notre Dame has. It's about finding high ceiling guys with elite potential that fit what you're trying to do. I don't obsess over the 5-star thing. Give me a roster full of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoahs and players like that, Will Fullers and guys like that who weren't sniffing 5 stars coming out of high school. I mean, yeah, it's nice and it looks good on paper and all that, but it's about talent. It's not about star rankings. Okay. Preston also says, safe to say we are basically done with DN recruiting outside of Cyrus Smalls. I think the only other DNs that they're looking at are maybe some big guys like an RJ Cooper who could potentially move inside and be a 3 technique. Jason says Denbrock is a fantastic coach. He coached on any position. He coached offensive line, tight ends, receivers. He's a heck of a coach. And Jason says Denbrock and Chuck Martin are really good position coaches. They were, and they were also very good recruiters. And that's just the thing is Kelly has struggled just consistently having the right. He's got good guys here and there, but then you got Mike Denbrock on staff with Charlie Molnar and Tim Hinton. Or Autry Denson, and it's just never an entire dynamic staff, and that's been the frustrating thing. Thomas Walsh asked, would Denbrock ever come back to Notre Dame in a position that's not offensive coordinator? I mean, look, he's currently the offensive coordinator for a team that's a top 10 preseason team at Cincinnati. I wouldn't come back to Notre Dame. I would not leave Cincinnati as the offensive coordinator, come back to Notre Dame to be a receivers coach. I just wouldn't do it. Billy, I appreciate the kind words. Well, look, I may be wrong, but I'm always going to be honest and tell you what I think. So I do appreciate that. Okay. C.W. Pura, cool coach. Thanks for the great work. Thanks for the energy and devotion. I'm from the 757, which was yes, my man. Did you go to high school in the 757? I went to Kempsville for 2 years and then graduated from Atlantic Shores. It's a pretty funny story about that. But yeah, welcome to the show. I appreciate it, and I definitely appreciate your support and being part of the channel. So let's and again, love the chats. It's a great way to support what we're doing here. Really appreciate y'all doing that. So let's see here. There's some questions about the billboards. I'm going to go back up to those real quick. So there were some Notre Dame's putting these billboards out, and it's of Notre Dame players, and they're doing it in. I mean, they're doing it in Phoenix, they're doing it in Dallas, Charlotte, Atlanta, Tampa, L.A., New Jersey. I mean, they're doing it all over the country, and it is such an awesome push. I'm gonna have an article about this tomorrow. I think it was absolutely brilliant, and it's a way. It's really a twofold thing. So the first one is The first one is it's a recruiting tool, right? So you're getting these Notre Dame players, and it's, here's why I came to Notre Dame. It's a billboard that basically kids say, here's, I'm Gabriel Rubio, I'm from St. Louis, and I chose Notre Dame, and here's why. The other part of it is, in my opinion, and I'm doing some digging on this, is that it is a beginning, a sort of a preemptive strike by Notre Dame, and obviously they can't pay players. But this is a great way to start building branding. So if you're someone in St. Louis and you've got these Notre Dame players that are from St. Louis, and all of a sudden there's these big billboards. Well, hey, if you're a local company, say, hey, you know what? I'd like to get with Notre Dame about maybe getting Kyron Williams to do an advertisement for us or something like that. So I think it's a great, and Mike D just said this. He said, pretty cool to see them post billboards. Great marketing on Notre Dame's behalf. It's great marketing for Notre Dame program, but it's also great marketing for these young men. Because if you look at who's on the billboards, it's players from those big communities. And so to me, with name, image, likeness right around the corner, this is the kind of stuff you can do to help players build up their brand. And it's not them doing it. This is the great thing about it is it's not the players doing it. It's Notre Dame doing it. And then potentially down the road, there could be some benefit to the players doing it. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's really smart. And I just, like I said, it's great. Jason, over 100 people watching a free 2-hour chat. Hit the like button for the YouTube algorithms. Yes. So that's why we have you do it. The like buttons, the engagement. So here's the way that YouTube is going to help promote our site and help it grow is if you hit the like button, if you comment, if you engage, it looks at views, it looks at the likes, it looks at engagement. And when it's getting a lot of that and it's getting the consistency of us we're putting out a show almost every day. That's going to start allowing them to promote us and more people see us. And that's how we grow. And that's how we continue doing what we're doing. So I really appreciate that. You hit the like button, comment, engage, ask me questions. I think you all know I'm a pretty open guy. I have open DMs. I tell you what my email address is. It's pretty easy. I made it as easy as possible. We have these chats. You can ask questions. I love talking ball, and I love talking Notre Dame, and I love talking college football. So if you want to talk, engage with me. If you don't agree with me, talk to me. I like talking when people don't agree with that disagree with me too, as long as it's respectful. Brandon says 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, 4 O-line, 2 tight ends, 4 linebackers, 5 D linemen, 5 DBs equals 26. I see this 2022 class being just as big as last year, considering Notre Dame could possibly take 4 receivers, 5 O-line, or even 6 D linemen. Potentially, yes, but right now they're not there yet. There's going to have to be some more departures, and I do expect a couple more departures coming up here very soon that could free point. And I like Brandon. I think they're recruiting to those numbers, but the reality is they may have to stop short at some of those positions, depending on what happens with other parts of it. Okay. Okay. Let's get down here. We're going to wrap up because StreamYard, I think this is StreamYard's way of telling me that it's time to wrap up the show because it keeps kicking me out. So Zach 817, does Notre Dame have a chance with Caleb Brown? That ship has sailed. That is no longer a deal. Okay, so you were not a Kempsville chief, but you're saying your wife was. Okay, so then that you get half props. You get 3/4 props because you get a quarter for being from the 757, and then your wife was from Kempsville. That was my old stomping ground. So we're almost right there. CW Pure, I really appreciate that. Okay, let's see here. We're not going to talk about Malaysian food. Talking about TV network. Mason, are you talking about the billboards? Because if you are, I completely agree with you. I think it was a great move. Great move. Really excellent. Michael Campbell asks, how can Notre Dame land Mike Arch Manning? I don't see them landing Arch Manning. I don't. I think this is a family that is very they understand the need to go somewhere that has a proven track record of developing quarterbacks, and Notre Dame just does not do that. Preston says, will we get to see there we go. We get to see the Notre Dame bat signal again anytime soon. Yeah, I think that you will. Okay. And no, that's not who I was talking about, but you'll find out soon enough. So it looks like that is the end of the questions. Did I miss anything? If you typed in a question that I did not ask and you're still with us, can you type it in now? Because there's parts of the show that the comments, we've had so many comments and questions that I can't get down to those now. And there are some people talking, we have some conversation going during the show, which I think is awesome. I love that. No issue with that. But I want to make sure that, look, if you stuck with me for 2 hours and you asked a question and I didn't get an answer to it, I definitely want to be able to answer it. So really appreciate everybody being with me tonight. I'm excited to continue growing this channel. This is definitely going to be something. I got this, and I did not equate the Twitter with the deal here. So, I appreciate that, and it's good chatting with you. I'll be chatting with you again. Corey D, will NBC extend Notre Dame deal beyond 2025? Corey, I honestly don't know. I think two factors are going to come into play here, and this is just my opinion. Number one is, how successful is Notre Dame in the next couple of years? I think right now, if you're NBC, you're loving Notre Dame. If you go look at some of the numbers that Notre Dame has produced in recent seasons, and you look at like the numbers for the Clemson game this year, and Notre Dame had really good home game numbers this year, despite not having a great schedule. If you look at some of the upcoming games, they've got Ohio State on the schedule coming up. And you look at looking forward past the 2025 contract, you've got Alabama coming on the schedule. You've got Texas A&M right around that time. So the schedule is looking very, very interesting. But if Notre Dame, let's just say hypothetically that Notre Dame goes 8-4 this year, and then they're just not able to keep this momentum going, and kind of 7-5 the next year, then I could see NBC maybe not wanting to get out of it, because we all know what's going to happen then, and that is the viewership's going to dry up. But I don't see that happening. Look, when I talk about Brian Kelly and I talk about my criticism for Brian Kelly, my criticism is that Brian Kelly's not doing A, B, C, and D that is keeping Notre Dame from winning a championship. When Charlie Weiss was here, when Ty was here, when Davey was here, it was just, can you be good? It's a different ball game. And so that's where that criticism comes from. And so when you're there with Notre Dame and you say, this program's close and they've got great ratings, they've got a really intriguing home schedule coming up with a lot of home and homes with, like I said, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. You say, yeah, you're attracted to that. So I think it would be, but NBC may also say, we want to get out of the college game. And that wouldn't shock me either. I have no evidence of that, other than I feel like they treat Notre Dame as their practice squad. Like they send, like, Drew Brees is going to basically get practice being a color guide. Then they're eventually going to take him up to NBC. They send these guys like Chris Sims and all these guys down there. And they experiment with these camera angles that they experiment at Notre Dame. And then if they like it, they'll take it to the NFL. And guinea pig is probably the way to say it. And I think that's disrespectful to Notre Dame. I really do. And so I would actually like to see, this is my dream scenario. I mentioned this the other day. I would like to see Notre Dame start talking to CBS behind the scenes, because CBS, I believe, is not going to have college football much longer because they're losing the SEC. I believe it could just be they're only going to have a game, or I can't remember what the deal is, but I believe the SEC is going to be with ESPN full time. So maybe you say, if CBS wants to stay in the college game, I mean, that'd be a great get. I mean, with Notre Dame still being independent, with the schedule coming up, with the fact that Notre Dame is good, because let's be real, if Notre Dame was under Lou Holtz, what they were under, like if Lou Holtz was basically just another Jerry Faust, Notre Dame doesn't sign an NBC contract because they're not a popular enough program. Part of it was it was always a great brand, but the brand was hot. From 88 to 93, Notre Dame they were a lot like Clemson and Ohio State are now. I mean, that's how good Notre Dame was. Miami at the time was what Alabama is now. Well, Notre Dame beat beat Miami twice during that stretch. And so it just worked out to where NBC was looking to do what they were doing, a time when Notre Dame was hot. And so I think Notre Dame was hot again. And especially if Notre Dame gets to a playoff game in the next couple of years and they win one or they win a championship, then there's no doubt NBC is going to do it. And that, to me, is when you could maybe see CBS start to jump into it. But, Michael said this. I'd love to see a CBS do. Michael, me too. That would be I think they do a great job with the SEC broadcast. I think their announcers are more professional. I love their camera angles better. The crowd noise is better on those things. And of course, anyone that knows me knows I couldn't tell you how excited I'd be every Saturday home game if at the beginning of a Notre Dame broadcast we had the CBS college football music. That is my favorite sports intro music ever. It gets me so hyped every time I hear it. So, that is really what gets me fired up. I got a couple questions that came in that Jonathan, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate that. We're going to always try to keep it up. And Preston, anytime, my man, you come and bring the questions and support the channel, buddy. The least I can do is answer your questions and show you the same respect that you're showing me. Colin has a couple questions here. What happened to Price Sock from California? Seemed like a couple months ago. You always take some, and now I haven't heard much about him since. Again, some of these California kids are just finishing up their seasons, so I think it's a little too early to tell. I don't know if I ever viewed him as a top target, but he's a guy that they offered, and he was in there. He made they made his top group a while ago. Where they stand now, I'm not sure. I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out, and he doesn't answer the phone, so we have to try to get him. And it says, looking at 2023 recruits, who do you see in the 2023 class who's talking a lot about Notre Dame and showing serious interest in Notre Dame? Honestly, that's a long list. Honestly, I think Dante Moore likes Notre Dame, a running back. There's 3 of the top running backs have talked about wanting to visit Notre Dame. Jalen Brown from Florida, I believe, has talked about it. Jalen Hale, Rico Flores, who just got offered, has talked about visiting. Cardinal Tate, they're in on. All 3 of the tight ends like Notre Dame: Jackson Howard, Mac Markway, and Deuce Robinson. Deuce Robinson is a teammate of Tosh Baker. Offensive line-wise, Caden Proctor has early interest. TJ Shanahan, who's a big-time top 100 guy, has a lot of interest in Notre Dame. They just recently offered Samson Okunlola, who is a beast from Massachusetts. Ohio State also just name a lot. John Walker is a top 2023 defensive tackle. He released a top 12 recently. Notre Dame was in it. Drake Bowen is a top 50 player, and he's from Indiana, a linebacker. Trey Edwards is a guy that likes Notre Dame a lot as a linebacker there. Michael Daugherty, we just had a story on from Georgia. AJ Harris is a guy that Notre Dame is on. Sonny Styles, who's Lorenzo Styles' younger brother, is a guy that likes Notre Dame a lot as a safety, a rover type of player. Akayan Lee, Cole Mitchell are corners. AJ Harris, a corner. Ethan Nation says good things to me. So there's a lot of 2023 guys that talk a lot about Notre Dame. And that's one of the things that we mentioned around about a month ago is I'm seeing more 2023 guys talk about how much they like Notre Dame than we've seen in a long time. Like 2023 meaning sophomores. So that's kind of what I see from there. All right, Brandon, I'm going to find your question here. Okay. Brandon says, here we go. Should Notre Dame only take 1 running back next cycle if they get 2 this year? Which prospects could you see being that one recruit? Yes, if they get 2 again this year, then there's no way they can take 2 next year unless they have some transfers. I see them taking 1. As far as who could be that guy, Brandon, it's too early. Right now, I have Notre Dame down as having offered 6 running backs. I'm going to have to see if this needs to be updated. Cedric Baxter from Florida, who just recently decommitted from Florida State. Dalton Brooks from Texas, Justin Haynes, who I believe you mentioned, who's very, very good from Georgia, Cedric Irvin Jr., which makes me feel super old because I remember his dad in college at Michigan State, Trayon Webb, who I don't see, Richard Young, who I don't see Notre Dame as really being a player for either one of those guys. It's still early for me to really feel like who that guy could be. I think right now their focus has been on get one of the 2 guys this year, and then they'll kind of see how it goes. All righty. So let's see. Anything else from y'all? Justin Haynes is definitely good. Colin says, here we go. Or let me go here. Corey D, do you think Notre Dame is still the biggest brand in college football? I say probably from a marketing standpoint, but I don't know if it's the biggest brand from an all-encompassing. I think Alabama and Ohio State are in that conversation when you talk about on-field and all that. But, yeah, I mean, look, go look at Notre Dame's TV ratings when they played Georgia. Go look what the TV ratings were when they played Clemson this year. Go look what the ratings are when Notre Dame's in the playoff. Notre Dame is still in the conversation as the biggest brand because whether you hate them or love them, you always want to watch Notre Dame. Let's see here. If you could pick one player from 2023, who could you pick? Right now, I'd probably go Dante Moore at quarterback. It's probably who I'd go, just off the top of my head. And I'm sure if I sat and thought, started looking through the offer list, there'd be like 10 other dudes that I would want. But just off the top of my head, he'd probably be he's a stud. But he's also local. He's a Detroit kid, which I like, and had a chance to interview him. He's a pretty sharp kid for how young he is. Because look, dynamic quarterback. If you get Tyler Buchner, and if Tyler Buchner's as good as we think he's going to be, and then a couple years later you follow that up with Dante Moore, that would be impressive. Colin C says, since Elson has become the recruiting coordinator, it seems like Notre Dame has been doing a better job with everybody. Could he possibly take over as head coach? Should Kelly leave earlier than expected? Possible. I mean, I don't know if that would be the route they would go, but I mean, gosh, if he continues doing what he's doing, developing defensive linemen and recruiting operation, then I certainly think he should get an interview, because there's nobody that loves Notre Dame as much as Mike Elson right now. He's done a tremendous job. Let's see here. Who can Notre Dame land as offensive coordinator to blow it up like Joe Brady did for LSU? I think he's already there. I think it's Tommy Rees. Look, I'll say it again, and hopefully, and this isn't towards you, Michael. I thought Tommy Rees was the wrong hire for 2020. I did. I thought he was not quite where he needed to be from an experience standpoint to take that experienced offense with 5 starters on offensive line, a quarterback the way it was, a veteran quarterback. I thought they needed to go with Joe Moorhead. But as I said at the time, what my dream scenario was is you hire Joe Moorhead. He comes in for 2 years. I would have had Coach Rees coach receivers or something like that, because I think it's always good for a guy that's only played one position and then coach the position he played to have experience coaching other positions. I said this for myself. I coached running backs and tight ends my first 2 years of college, and it was such a great experience for me. Just to be able to coach another position that I was unfamiliar with and see the game from a different viewpoint was great for me as a coach. And then when Moorhead leaves in 2 years to take a head coaching job, Tommy takes over at 30 years old. So a very similar path. My issue with Tommy Rees being hired was simply the timing of it. It was always an inevitable thing for me, and it was an inevitable thing that I'm fired up about. I mean, go back to when he was a player. He's going to be a great coach, because you don't have the success Tommy Rees had with his talent if you're not really wicked smart and if you don't get the game. So I think Tommy Rees could be that guy. I just felt that he needed a little bit more seasoning. And we're going to find out in 2021 if I'm right or wrong, Michael. Because if I'm right, you're going to see Notre Dame take a big jump in scoring this year because he's got weapons. If I'm wrong, then they're going to score 34, 35 points a game, maybe 36, beat up on the junk teams and still not score against the better teams. But I really feel he can be that guy. I think their upgrades need to happen. I don't think the upgrade needs to be an offensive coordinator. I think there's upgrades at 2 other positions that need to happen. Sean Rogers says, do you see 3 to 5 departures before the season? I see at least 2 linemen, at least a receiver, and maybe a corner. What's your take? I don't know if any corners are going to go. I think the way that Notre Dame is coaching right now, I think those kids really like Mike Mickens too. And they're all young. They're all battling. So I don't know if I'd see a corner. That maybe surprised me a little bit. Another receiver, I think we'll see a receiver, possibly see a receiver leave. And it's probably not who people are thinking of. At least 2 linemen, maybe, definitely 1. So, I mean, I could see 3. I don't know if I'd get to 5 just yet, but I could see 3 being gone before the next season, certainly. Does Buchner start at Ohio State in 2023? Are you talking about 2022? Because they play at Ohio State, I believe, to start the 2022 season. And yes, I would be a little surprised if Tyler Buchner's not Notre Dame's starting quarterback when they take on Ohio State in 2022. He'll definitely be the starter by 2023 unless he's injured. Dropping dimes, hot take, but I think Buchner could take us to a national title. I agree. And I don't think it's in 2021 because I think it's Jack Cohn is the right guy for the job right now. But yes, I think Tyler Buchner, if Tyler Buchner's as good as I think he can be, he's the type of dynamic quarterback that you need to win a championship. I wholeheartedly believe that. And yes, 2022. So Corey, you were talking about, yes, I do think he'll be the starter against Ohio State 2022. Colin C says, is there a reason Notre Dame doesn't normally land 5-star guys? I know rankings don't really matter, but it seems Notre Dame gets 15-star every 1 5-star every 3-4 years when teams like Alabama get 2 to 3 every couple months. It's a good way of putting it. I just don't think Notre Dame focuses on those type of guys. Look, 5 stars to me are guys that are ready to play right now. That's the difference. 5 stars tend to be a little bit more developed, a little bit more of a sure thing, a little bit more ready to play as a true freshman. They also tend to be from specific areas, okay? And Notre Dame just doesn't have a lot of success in those areas. To me, I don't care about 5-star recruits. I care about guys that have the ability to play like 5 stars in college. And to me, that's what I focus more on. I mean, look, Wayne Meichenberg, to me, played like a 5-star. He was a consensus All-American. He wasn't a 5-star recruit. Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah played like a 5-star. Julian Love played like a 5-star. To me, Kyron Williams this year, if he does what I think he could do, plays like a 5-star. So, and look, the other thing too is they're not getting getting one every 5 years. Notre Dame got back-to-back 5-stars in 19 and 20. Kyle Hamilton was a 5-star in 2019. Michael Mayer was a 5-star in 2020. So, and then Blake Fisher was a 5-star in 2021. So, they've literally gotten a 5-star each of the last 3 years. Maybe not consensus 5 stars. I think Michael Mayer was a consensus 5-star. Kyle Hamilton wasn't a consensus 5-star because ESPN sucks, and that's also the outlet that had Quentin Nelson outside of the top 100. But even though Rivals had him as a 5-star, so they've gotten 5 stars, but it's more about just give me a guy that's going to play like a 5-star. I don't really care as much about the rankings. Ryan McCarty, still no news on Xavier Bradshaw visit to Notre Dame. Is he planning on setting one up? So everything we have heard, he told us when we interviewed him a few weeks ago that he was going to set up a visit and was working on it. I've been told on the Notre Dame side of things he's working on it. He just doesn't do a lot of talking to the media. So I would assume, Ryan, that he is setting one up. I think the lack of news is just about he's not a kid that really engages in the interview stuff. He's just a kind of a quiet, go about your business kind of guy. So he's the kind of kid that could commit to Notre Dame and we wouldn't know it because he doesn't tweet it. I could see him doing something like that, or North Carolina or wherever he's going to commit. He's not a silent commit, so I didn't want it to come across that way. But just using an example. Okay, let's see here. Any last questions? And a lot of great questions, and I appreciate it. Ryan McCarty also asks, is Zach Rice a year 1 starter if he comes to Notre Dame? I don't think so. Again, as a junior right now, I don't think so. I think with Tosh Baker and Blake Fisher, it's going to be hard for him to start as a true freshman. Now, I would have also not said Blake Fisher was a true right-away starter as a junior. Blake got a lot better. He reshaped his body. He got a lot better as a senior. So I'd have to see it. And, Blake Fisher's another example of why these rankings just don't make a lot. Blake Fisher, Rivals has him ranked 20th in the country, and 247 doesn't even have him. ESPN doesn't even have him top 100. So does that mean he's not a 5-star because one service dragged his grade way down? I don't put a lot into that. Corey D, does Lorenzo Styles and Xavier Watts see the field with some regularity this year? Possibly. It's going to be hard for any of those young guys to get playing time because the older players are really good. My hope is that Notre Dame goes with a 5-6-man rotation. And look, with Jordan Johnson's decision to transfer, this is a great opportunity for Xavier Watts and Lorenzo Styles, especially if Xavier sticks it out. I think he will. Hope he will if he sticks it out. And I want to clear up something too. I said the other day, we were talking about the Jordan Johnson depth chart, and I said, should a guy like Xavier Watts or Jay Brunell transfer? And somebody took that and went to another channel and said that we said he was going to transfer. I never said that. I'm using examples. If I said so-and-so gets hurt, it doesn't mean that so-and-so's hurt. I'm trying to make an example of if someone else transfers, then they're in a bad spot. That's all I said, and if someone took it differently, I apologize you took it that way, but that's not what I said. I am not predicting Xavier Watts is going to transfer. I have not been told Xavier Watts is going to transfer, and I'm trying to hint that he will, so it looks like I'm scooping everybody. That's not the case. The latest information I got is that Xavier plans on staying and competing. Now, could that change? Sure, but that could change with anybody. I just was using an example. If Xavier stays, if Lorenzo stays, if they're both healthy, then Jordan Johnson leaving is a great opportunity for both of them to step on the field and play this year, especially those, because to me, Jordan was playing a lot of X during practice. Even though he played some boundary in the spring game, but he's playing X during a lot of the practices. And now that's another opportunity because Once Kevin Austin comes back, it's going to be Austin and Wilkins at the W. Jordan was saying was going to play more X. And now there's that opportunity for Xavier to move back over there where he belongs, because they had him at W this spring, which is just silly, and just not where you'd want a 5'11", 185-pound guy at W. But now he can maybe move to X and compete there, where I think is his best position, and the same thing with Lorenzo Styles. So this certainly gives him an opportunity. Colin C. says, piggybacking off the 5-star question, is Notre Dame good at developing lower-ranked guys, or are they just really underrated? I think it's both. Colin, it's not like Notre Dame is like this masterful program of taking guys that aren't that good and then developing them into great players. They always had the talent. I think what Notre Dame is good at, and a guy that I think deserves a lot of the credit for this is Bill Reese, who's a longtime scout. I mean, he was an assistant back on Terry Donahue's UCLA staffs. He's been an NFL scout. He's really good at identifying guys that have those frames. Say, hey, look, this guy may not be great now, but you look at his shoulders, his hands, he's got big feet, all these different things. I think that guy's going to really blow up. He's someone that, and Clark Lee told me this story. Clark Lee told me, I can say it now that he's gone. He told me that Osita came to Notre Dame's campus as on a visit for a camp, and he was like 185 pounds. And obviously the coaches were like, we're not recruiting that guy. And Clark told me that Bill Reese said to him, he's like, Clark, stay on this kid, because you look at his frame, he's explained all these reasons why he thought he was going to blow up. Well, now Osita's playing Viper in a blue gold game. So I think Bill is really good at that, and I think he helps with identifying that. But they've been doing it for a while. I think it's part development, but it's also about, again, players are different. It's why I created the upside grade, because some guys you look at and say, that guy's already a man. He's already as good as he's going to be, and he may be better as a freshman, but he's not going to be better when he's a senior. Other guys, you say, hey, this guy may not be good right now, but if you're patient with him, he's going to be a great player. It's the difference between, like Michael Mayer and Tyler Eifert. Michael Mayer is going to have a heck of a career to be better than Tyler Eifert. Would anyone doubt that he was not better as a freshman? That's because Tyler Eifert was undersized and needed development and to build up his body, whereas Michael Mayer showed up on the day he got to Notre Dame. He was physically ready to play. To me, that's the difference between a 5-star player today and a 5-star player in 3 years. It's that ability to develop where some guys are just ready to go. And so I think Notre Dame has done a good job of developing and landing those players, where Alabama's getting the guy that's ready to play tomorrow. Notre Dame's getting the guys that are going to be ready to play in 2 or 3 years. And that's the difference, in my opinion. And I think they're very good at that. And if they can find a 5-star guy that fits the mold of what they want to do and is in a need and has all the traits and things that they look for, then they'll go after them. But they're just not obsessed with it. Georgia's obsessed with stars, which is why I think Georgia consistently underachieves. Notre Dame cares about talent, and they don't care if you're a 3-star player or a 5-star player. They want talent. And I think especially on defense, that's what Mike Elko was great at. Clark was pretty good at that. I mean, Clark Lee got on Prince Colley when he was a 3-star and nobody cared. And we saw what he became. Michael Moore says, I don't think BK will ever let Buckner start at Notre Dame. He likes Pine too much, and Pine is his kind of guy. I hate to say it, but I believe it. Michael, I strongly disagree with that. Number one, I think the fact that they did with Buckner what they did this spring shows you that they have high hopes for him. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't believe that. I believe that Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, to Tommy Rees, to everybody, is crossing their fingers that Tyler Buckner's as good as they think he'll be. Okay. RP, if you could pick one realistic current offensive recruit to land, who would it be and why? Gosh, it's Xavier Bradshaw. And the reason I would say is because there's nobody else like him on the board. And I don't know if they have many guys like him on the roster. And the guys that are kind of like him are going to be gone after this year or gone shortly thereafter. So, look, Tobias Merriweather's a heck of a player, but Notre Dame has got a guy like him last year in Deion Colsey. They don't have anybody, in my opinion, on the roster. Xavier Watts is about the only guy I see on the roster, to me, that's an underclassman that's like Xavier Bradshaw. That's it. Nobody else is like him. So if I could say one offensive commit that I say, I could guarantee that they're going to land him, it would be him. Sean Rogers says he would take Zach Rice. So here we go. Okay. Sean Rogers says, I agree with Jason. Cheeks and Snead are the best fit. I get that. I get that. And then Omar says, I think not getting 5 stars and making the playoffs consistently and producing pros is a plus. I would say so, yeah, because I think that's ultimately, Omar, and we'll wrap up with this. That's the selling pitch for Notre Dame is if you find a 5-star guy that you like and he happens to be a 5-star, because that's how Notre Dame recruits, and you say, look, man, here's the deal. And if you're talking to an elite quarterback in 23, you say, hey, look, man, look what we did with Ian Book. We took this 3-star kid that's like 6 feet tall, doesn't have a great arm, and we turned him into a 4th-round draft pick. I mean, imagine what we could do. I mean, he went 30-5 and made 2 playoff appearances. Imagine what we could do with you. I think that's a big-time selling point. You talk to him, man, hey, look what we do with Kyron Williams. Kyron's was a 3-star player. Ohio State didn't want him. Bama didn't want him. Oklahoma didn't want him. He comes to us, and he's an All-American by sophomore year. He's going to maybe be a 1st or 2nd-round draft pick. What do you think we could do with you? So, Omar, I think they could really sell that. And they are. And trust me, you don't think Mike Elson's saying to Cyrus Moss, hey, man, look what I did in 2016. We got Adi Ogundeji from Western Michigan. He was a 3-star. Julian Aguara was not a top 200 player. Khalid Kareem was not a top 200 player. Dalen Hayes was a 5-star, but he played 8 games in high school, and he was a linebacker. And we took those 4 guys, and we made all of them NFL draft picks. Imagine what we could do with you and Tyson Ford and Aiden Gaber and Darren Agu. That's a great selling point. And, hey, look, if you're worried about being a 4th guy, look what we just did. We turned 4 defensive ends in one class into NFL players. I think it's a great selling point. And so, yeah, that stuff helps. I love the optimism. Michael, thanks for joining us. This was a lot of fun for me. I think it's been 2.5 hours. My wife's going to be a little ticked off. I'm going to have to go up and talk to her. Hopefully she's still awake. Corey, appreciate it, man. Appreciate you being a part of what we're doing. So everybody, please hit the like button on your way out. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Check out our website at irishbreakdown.com and be with us for all these. We're going to start doing these every day. We're going to have a podcast tomorrow. Still not sure what we're going to talk about. Friday, 1:00 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have a Friday free-for-all. And you never know, we may do something this weekend. So if there's topics you guys would like to discuss, you guys and gals would like to discuss, hit me up on Twitter, send me a DM, reply to this thing right here. Again, interaction, engagement, responses are all things that help us with algorithms to get our show promoted. So let me know. Hey, I'd love for you to talk about this. I'd love for you to explain this. I'd love for you to do this. I could start doing some 15, 20-minute videos where we talk football. This summer, I plan on doing that football one-on-one. I plan on making that a regular thing where we do football one-on-one. So if there's things y'all would like for us to talk about, whether it be big picture, small picture, a recruiting position, leave it in the comments section. Hit me up on Twitter. Shoot me an email, whatever the case may be. But just let me know, because we want to make sure that we're providing the content that y'all want to hear. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. And DBZ, thank you so much for your service. And everybody else, thank you so much for being with me tonight. I'll talk to all of y'all again very, very soon.